Chapter 57. With a flash of blood, a Yulan army soldier riding on a crocodile waved his hand, and two rangers who had just crawled out from a pile of bricks and tiles fell to the ground, howling miserably. The long sword sliced through their necks, almost cutting off their heads. Blood sprayed a few feet away, and soon, a puddle of sticky blood had accumulated on the ground. The Yulan army soldier let out a complacent laugh, then spat to the side with a disdainful look. While he was tilting his head, a barbarian hunter hiding under a collapsed canopy, holding a palm-sized crossbow in his hand, let out a hideous smile and shot out a tiny tree spike. The 3-inch-long, hair-thin tree spike shot 20 feet away and hit the exposed neck of the barbarian hunter. The tree spike was dipped in the venom of widowflower spider, a specialty of Meng Mountains. The barbarian hunter's body turned stiff, and after riding on his crocodiles for a few hundred feet, he suddenly coughed out a mouthful of black blood and fell to the ground. 100 gold coins in hand. The barbarian hunter who had successfully killed the enemy smacked his lips complacently. Just when he was about to stand up and move to another place for ambush, 3 pure steel bolts came whistling over, piercing through the canopy and piercing into his back, nailing him to the ground. 2 Yulan army soldiers dashed over, thrusting out their lances and piercing through the canopy, tossing the dead body of the barbarian hunter up into the air. The heavy lance struck the dead body of the barbarian hunter a few hundred feet away, and when it landed on the ground, it was broken into 3 parts. Damn bastard! After killing the barbarian hunter, the 2 Yulan army soldiers stared at the dead body of their comrade with flames of fury in their eyes. The 1st Heaven Battalion of Yulan Army claimed to be the strongest force in the Lu Kingdom, had lost one of their men in a remote place like Little Meng City. If this news spread out, it would be a great disgrace to the entire Yulan Army. While the furious Yulan Army soldiers were about to continue their assault, a dozen city guards suddenly rushed out from a leaning restaurant on the roadside, howling and yelling. They leaped onto the back of crocodiles in a frenzy, surrounding the 2 Yulan army soldiers, and began to stab and hack at the 2 Yulan army soldiers. Most of the houses in the city had collapsed, and there were piles of rubble everywhere. Before the 2 Yulan army soldiers could react, they were pushed down to the ground by these crazy city guards. Poor 2 elite Yulan army soldiers, whose cultivation base was over 30 years, were chopped into meat paste by a dozen city guards who were less than 10 years. Having lost their masters, the 2 crocodiles went mad. They exerted all their strength and slapped their front claws. Miserable howls rang out. 5 city guards had their chests torn open by the crocodiles and died on the spot. The other city guards quickly chopped off the heads of the royal guards and hurriedly fled the scene with 2 heads in their hands. 2 crocodiles and of Yulan of crocodiles. And crocodiles. 2 of them of crocodiles. Arrow of sound of came out from the army. There were figures bathed in blood fighting everywhere, and ear-piercing battle cries could be heard everywhere. The smell of blood was everywhere, and the reflection of swords and sabers could be seen everywhere. Over 100,000 lucky survivors of Little Meng City were fighting fiercely with over 6,000 soldiers of Yulan Army, who had broken into the city. If it were any other city in the Lu Kingdom, when over 6,000 crocodiles broke into the city, what awaited them would be a brutal massacre. The experience of these Yulan Army soldiers in the past had given them the same experience. But Little Meng City was different. The people and civilians of Little Meng City did not collapse. Little Meng City was located in the most desolate and remote area of the Lu Kingdom, relying on Meng Mountains for its development. All the people in this city were desperados. Basically, there was not a single kind-hearted person in this city. Everyone could fight with weapons, and they were all murderers who made their living on the edge of a blade. Even those prostitutes who did business on the streets, when it was convenient for them, didn't mind doing some shady business that involved money and murder. This was a deformed city of violence, a city born from the desire for money. If the soldiers of Yulan Army were 6,000 ferocious tigers, then the people and civilians of Little Meng City were hundreds of thousands of hungry wolves, and they were driven into a desperate situation by the order to kill. But everyone, including Luo Kadi and Ma Liang, treated the people of Little Meng City as hundreds of thousands of sheep. Slaughter, endless slaughter. Be it the people or civilians of Little Meng City, men or women, old or young. All of them were holding weapons in their hands, fighting crazily with the soldiers of Yulan army. If they risked their lives to kill one, they would get 100 gold coins, but if they didn't, they would be killed in vain. Right when they entered the city, 300 soldiers of Yulan army were killed. 15 minutes later, another 500 soldiers of Yulan army were killed. Half an hour later, 1,800 soldiers of Yulan army were killed, and there were less than 4,000 soldiers who could still fight. The rain of arrows from Mo machine had killed over 50,000 soldiers and civilians of Little Meng City, and the number of casualties was no less than 50,000. However, after paying the price of over 5,000 soldiers, the remaining 100,000 civilians had killed over 1,800 soldiers of Yulan army, and had taken away a huge chunk of meat from them. Wu Qi slapped his own forehead forcefully and scolded under his breath. "Wu Qi, you pig!" With the incredible intelligence of Lu Xiaobai, she had instantly figured out the cause and effect of the battle. It was true that Yulan army had an overwhelming advantage in overall strength, but Wu Qi had neglected the nature of the people of Little Meng City. They were a group of ferocious and evil thugs, who had taken root among the barbarians. Over 100,000 thugs, not over 100,000 innocent civilians. Could they not withstand the attack from several thousand elite soldiers? Furthermore, there were so many rangers, barbarian hunters, and guards of merchant in Little Meng City. When Ma Liang gave out the order to kill everyone in Little Meng City, all the people in Little Meng City had been forced to stand together. Driven by the will to survive, these 6,000 cavalries of Yulan army were nothing to them. Not to mention the ridiculously high reward offered by Wu Qi. The reward for killing a cavalryman of Yulan army was 100 gold coins, which was more than enough to make any ranger or barbarian hunter increase their combat strength by 10 times. Letting out a joyful cry, Wu Qi roared, "Seal the city gate. Trap these damn Yulan army. Haha, as long as they are trapped in the city, they won't dare to shoot any more arrows. My men, trap them. Don't let them leave the city." No one was stupid. After listening to Wu Qi's words, the people of Little Meng City immediately understood that these cavalries of Yulan army were the best hostages. As long as they were trapped in the city, Luo Kadi and Ma Liang would never dare to order Mo machine to continue shooting arrows. Losing over 1,000 Crocata's cavalries of Yulan army, they could still find an excuse to get away with it. But if the entire First Heaven Corps of Yulan army was wiped out here, even Princess Ying Chuan and Lord Baishua would not be able to withstand the fury of the monarch of Lu Kingdom. As long as these damn Crocata's cavalries were trapped, Mo machine would never dare to shoot arrows again. Wu Qi cried out again, "Buy Crocatas at a high price. 200 gold coins for a live Crocata. My men, capture a Crocata alive, 200 gold coins." Lu Qingfeng's eyes lit up. 200 gold coins for a Crocata? This was definitely a good deal. He had begun to imagine the scene where all his personal guards were riding on Crocatas. Outside the city, Luo Kadi and Ma Liang were looking at each other, their bodies trembling violently. The situation had turned out to be out of control. Even if they were to chop off their heads, they would never have thought this would happen. A mere Little Meng City had actually trapped the First Heaven Corps of Yulan army. Were they having a nightmare? With his mind completely blank, Luo Kadi raised up his right hand while trembling and cried out, "Under the order of Princess Ying Chuan, we are to break into Little Meng City and kill every single living being to be buried with the marquis. All Mo machines, fill the arrow boxes, get ready." Ma Liang kicked Luo Kadi off his mount, then roared with a hoarse voice, "Are you crazy? Our men are still in the city. If they are dead, we will all die." The First Heaven Corps of Yulan army was completely annihilated in Little Meng City. Just like what Wu Qi had expected, Ma Liang and Luo Kadi, including Princess Ying Chuan and Lord Baishua who were behind them, couldn't shoulder this responsibility. Luo Kadi sat on the ground, mumbling to himself, "What should we do? What should we do? We're finished, we're finished. How did this war end up like this?" Ma Liang was badly battered as well, and he had no idea how to deal with this situation. His body was trembling, and he could only stare blankly at Little Meng City, which was now in a complete mess. All of a sudden, the sound of an iron drum was heard coming from afar. After the sound of an iron drum, it was followed by an endless stream of iron drum beats, which sounded like the raging waves of the ocean. Following the sound of the iron drum were countless shrill sounds of bugles. Some were sharp, some were sonorous, some were deep, and some were hoarse, but they all combined into a frightening sound wave that could make one's heart tremble. Together with the deep and furious sound of the iron drum, it ruled over this part of the world. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a large flock of huge birds flew out from Meng Mountains, hovering above Little Meng City. Over 3,000 huge eagles and eagles were wheeling in the sky, and on the back of these huge birds, there were some short and shriveled bird barbarians. Smoke and dust soared up into the sky, and from every corner of Meng Mountains that surrounded Little Meng City, a large number of barbarians rushed out like a tsunami. From the east, over 10,000 barbarians were driving an endless number of huge beasts and charging towards Little Meng City. In front of these 20,000 barbarians and countless huge beasts, over 30 barbarian beast warriors had their bodies shrouded in a bright flame as they strode in front of the army. From the west, over 10,000 barbarians who looked like ghosts and monsters were charging towards Little Meng City together with a chilly wind. Surrounding these barbarians were countless poisonous bugs, forming a vast ocean. Spiders the size of a water tank, poisonous pythons the size of a bowl, centipedes that were 3 to 5 feet long, and countless ferocious poisonous bugs were rolling and rolling in the ocean of bugs. From the north, over 10,000 barbarian cavalries riding on bison-horned bulls were getting ready to charge. Every single one of these cavalries was equipped with an armor that was exactly the same as the standard armor of the Lu Kingdom. Obviously, these armors and weapons were not made by these barbarians themselves. From the south, a couple dozens of barbarian leaders, who were clad in beast skins and had bird feathers on their heads, were riding on all kinds of low-grade magical items. Leading over 50,000 barbarian warriors, they were striking a few hundred iron drums and blowing a few thousand bugles as they charged towards Little Meng City. Zhang Hu and Hu Wei, the two old men of Little Meng City, let out a miserable cry at the same time. Oh heavens, this is a barbarian tide! And it is scarier than any barbarian tide. Lu Qingfeng's face turned pale. When it rains, it pours. Little Meng City is facing a great calamity. Meanwhile, Wu Qi suddenly let out a loud laugh and said, "This is great. Luckily, Luo Kadi and his men are here to stop them." Raising his voice, Wu Qi shouted, "By the order of the mayor, open the city gate, and ask the Yulan army to get the hell out of Little Meng City." Lu Qingfeng, Zhang Hu, and Hu Wei were startled. Then their faces suddenly turned red. There were still 80 MO machines outside. What was there to be afraid of? Chapter 58. Cheap blood sprayed onto the ground, forming a small spring, and then forming a pool of blood with a circumference of a few miles. The curtain of arrows rose again. 10 MO machines fired all the arrows in their quiver at the fastest speed possible. When all 20 MO machines in the north of the city had shot out all the arrows in their boxes, only 800 barbarians were left from over 10,000 barbarians. The overly dense charging formation and the overly close distance had allowed MO machines to unleash their most lethal force. The ground was filled with corpses and blood. Those barbarians who were lucky enough to survive the rain of arrows were driving their mounts and charging forward in a daze. Their dull eyes could no longer see their enemies. In the face of the frightening destructive force of MO machines, the over 10,000 barbarian cavalries charging in the north of the city had become the weakest link in this barbarian tide. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, over 10,000 barbarian cavalries were severely wounded by MO machines, and the rest of them were killed by Yulan army. Dust and smoke rose into the sky, and the clattering of hooves sounded like thunder. The remaining 4,000 Crocodi's cavalries of Yulan army rushed out from the north gate of Little Meng City in a panic. By letting the cavalries of Yulan army deal with the barbarian cavalries, Wu Qi had purposely driven them out from the north gate. This was a wicked idea that originated from Lu Xiaobai in Wu Qi's soul. A clash of cavalries in the era of cold weapons. This was going to be a great battle that was pleasing to the eyes. But he never knew that the barbarian tide, which even the king of Lu dynasty treated as a joke, would bring him such despair when he witnessed it with his own eyes. Before Luo Kadi gave the order, when the barbarians had just appeared, Those soldiers who were controlling MO machines had already begun to turn them around. Accompanied by the sound of grinding gears, the heads of MO machines slowly lowered down, gradually reaching a horizontal position with the ground. Without needing Luo Kadi to say anything, the sound of a ratchet turning came out from all 80 MO machines at the same time, as powerful crossbow strings were loaded and shot out. Luo Kadi, seeing that the countless barbarians were less than a mile away from him, yet Luo Kadi was still standing there in a daze, Mai Liang shouted out hastily. Driven by a strange sense of schadenfreude, the efficiency of the soldiers and civilians in the city was greatly increased. In just a short period of time, the wall that had been blasted open was completely blocked, and the height of the padding was more than 10 feet higher than the walls on both sides. The cavalries of barbarians were getting closer and closer to Little Meng City. The barbarian soldiers from the other 3 directions were also being led by the leaders of different tribes, and were rushing toward Little Meng City, leaving a trail of dust behind them. Without any communication or preparation, the barbarian army launched a brazen attack when they were within a certain distance from them. In the east of the city, MO machines shot out a whistling rain of arrows, shooting across the sky like a dark curtain of arrows. Wherever the arrows passed, streams of blood would spurt out hundreds of feet away. 3 barbarian beast warriors didn't manage to dodge in time, and their bodies were pierced through by the arrows. A large amount of blood mist sprayed out from their bodies. Their waists were broken by the arrows, and their upper bodies were sent flying back by the powerful force of the arrows. However, their lower bodies were still able to dash forward for over 100 feet. Luo Kadi immediately recovered from his shock. He circulated his innate energy and shouted out loud, "All MO machines, aim at these barbarians, kill them all." Those barbarians who had controlled the poisonous bugs to attack the city from the west of the city let out a complacent and hideous laugh. Together with a chilly breeze and some strange whistles, they strode toward Little Meng City. Their whistles drove the poisonous bugs to attack Little Meng City, and very soon, they had arrived in front of the city wall. MO machines had also shot out a destructive rain of arrows, killing a huge number of poisonous bugs. Poisonous pythons as thick as a bowl, spiders the size of a water tank, centipedes a few feet long, scorpions the size of a millstone. All these huge poisonous bugs couldn't withstand the arrows of MO machines, and were all killed in just a blink of an eye. He had heard about the barbarian tide before. Basically, every 2 to 3 years, Little Meng City would be besieged by an army of barbarians. Using a huge amount of poisonous bugs and wild beasts, as well as all kinds of strange forces, these barbarians would charge forward like a tidal wave. Each time, they would cause Little Meng City severe casualties. This was the so-called barbarian tide. Tens of thousands of barbarian cavalries in the north smashed the head of their flat-horned bison, then increased their speed and charged forward. The dark rain of arrows shot out horizontally across the ground. 10 of the 20 MO machines in the north of the city had arrived at the junction of the north and west city walls. Looking at the fearsome poisonous bugs, 10 MO machines quickly stopped and dared not move forward. Tens of thousands of venomous barbarians who had controlled the poisonous bugs to attack the city had entered the shooting range of these 10 MO machines. Facing the rain of arrows, these dozens of beast warriors had no choice but to dodge to the left and right, unable to move forward. Even though they had the powerful strength from beast souls, even though their offensive strength was no weaker than a warrior of Xiantian realm, when facing MO machines, these killing machines on the battlefield, they had no choice but to throw their heads back and roar angrily. The knight had regained his composure. They were not the imperial envoys who had been ordered to investigate a case. No matter who was the one who had colluded with the barbarians, they had to get through this crisis first. However, when he turned his head around, he saw the soldiers and civilians of Little Meng City were moving a great amount of bricks and stones, as well as a great amount of beams and pillars, filling up the gap on the city wall that he had ordered to blast out. More than half of the civilian houses in the city had collapsed due to the rain of arrows, and there were a great amount of broken buildings near the city gate, which could be used to fill up the city wall. The dozens of barbarian beast warriors from the east of the city had arrived at a place less than half a mile away from MO machines. Behind them, there were all kinds of strange and ferocious beasts. Tigers, rhinos, orangutans, wild boars, buffaloes, all kinds of wild beasts had their eyes turned red. Panting heavily, they were charging toward Little Meng City with no regard for their lives. Almost instinctively, Luo Kadi turned his mount around and was about to call back his soldiers and charge into Little Meng City. He had no courage to fight a wild battle with these barbarians, who had an absolute advantage over them. His instinct told him that once he had a head-on confrontation with these barbarians, all the soldiers he had brought here would be devoured by them. Suddenly, a dense rain of arrows was shot down from the sky. The bird barbarians, who had been hovering in the sky and watching the battle below, had finally slowly pulled their bows open and launched an attack at the ground. Blood sprayed everywhere. The first wave of arrows had killed over 1,000 barbarian cavalries with ease. Then came the second wave, the third wave, and the fourth wave. 20 MO machines from the north of the city quickly divided into two teams, rushing toward the east and west of the city as reinforcements. However, the majority of the poisonous bugs were tens of thousands of normal-sized poisonous bugs. There were poisonous snakes a few feet long and as thick as a thumb, poisonous spiders the size of a thumb to the size of a fist, centipedes a few inches long, and scorpions the size of a palm. There were nearly 500,000 poisonous bugs, covering an area of a few miles. They let out shrill screeches and rushed toward the MO machines. The barbarian beast warriors from the east took a few dozen feet forward with a single step, leading countless ferocious beasts, and leaping toward the MO machines at the same speed. The cavalries of Yulin army rushed forward, and easily killed these barbarian cavalries who had lost their will to fight. Luo Kadi glared at this cavalries fiercely and cursed furiously. What does this have to do with us? Form up, let's fight these barbarians to the death. The dozens of barbarian leaders from the south slowly slowed down their speed. Behind them, several tens of thousands of barbarian soldiers were beating the iron drums and blowing the bugles, brushing past these leaders and leaping forward like a group of mad beasts. Hundreds of crude scaling ladders were thrown to the ground by these barbarian soldiers, and were soon trampled into sawdust. The city gate of Little Meng City was wide open, and a large part of the city wall had been blown away. Therefore, scaling ladders were no longer needed. Large groups of wild beasts were letting out miserable cries. They didn't know how to dodge, and only knew how to charge forward crazily. Usually, one arrow would pierce through the bodies of 7 to 8 wild beasts, and only then would it be embedded in the bodies of these wild beasts. The situation in the south of the city was even more miserable. Groups of barbarian soldiers who had been charging forward had fallen to the ground. The MO machines let out joyful whistling noises, unleashing a torrent of arrows that harvested the lives of these barbarian soldiers. From 50 steps in front of the MO machines to 2 miles away, the entire area had turned into a dead zone. Any barbarian soldier who dared to step into this area would be shot to death by the powerful arrows. However, to Wu Qi's disappointment, the cavalries of Yulin army didn't attack the barbarians bravely while shouting their slogans. Instead, they cowardly hid behind the MO machines and formed a thin line of defense. All the cavalries turned their heads and stared at Little Meng City, their eyes filled with fear and panic. The soldiers in the MO machines were bitten to death by the poisonous bugs that had crawled into them. 20 MO machines had become useless. The MO machines, which had the ability to kill large targets, had lost all their power when facing these tiny poisonous bugs. The barbarians' attack had fallen into a stalemate, and only the barbarians at the west of the city had made great progress. Over 1,000 barbarian cavalries and their mounts who were charging at the forefront let out miserable cries at the same time. From a distance of a mile, the heavy crossbows of MO machines had easily pierced through the heavy armors worn by these barbarians, pierced through their bodies, and pierced into the bodies of their companions behind them. More than half of the over 10,000 Gu barbarians had fallen to the ground. The poisonous bugs controlled by them were thrown into chaos and scattered in all directions. Luo Kadi swallowed a mouthful of saliva with great difficulty, looking at the barbarians who had surrounded them from all sides in a panic. The poisonous bugs swarmed over and leaped onto the soldiers who were controlling the MO machines. Miserable cries rang out. Hundreds of soldiers were drowned by the tide of bugs, and very soon, they fell to the ground. The tide of bugs flowed past these soldiers, and very soon, Those soldiers who kept twisting and struggling had lost all signs of life. When the tide of bugs was gone, all that was left on the ground was a pile of pitch-black bones. A few cavalries jumped down from their crocodiles and began checking the equipment of these barbarian cavalries. A cavalries quickly brought a helmet and a large sword and came before Luo Kadi. "General, all the armors and weapons are the standard military equipment of the Lu Kingdom." The cavalries had an excited smile on his face. He had long heard that some people were colluding with barbarians and selling military equipment to them. Now that he had found the evidence, it might be a great merit for him. The ones who launched the attack from the west of Little Meng City were the Gu barbarians, the scariest tribe in Meng Mountains. They were a group of barbarians who specialized in controlling all kinds of poisonous bugs, and they possessed all kinds of unimaginable and bizarre powers. Countless poisonous bugs crazily charged toward Little Meng City, and like a tidal wave, they charged toward the MO machines that were defending the west side of the city wall. Sharp cries of bugs were heard coming from the west. Countless strange and bizarre bugs sprung up into the sky and swarmed toward the city like a tidal wave. Even Ma Liang, who was usually proud of his intelligence, was struck dumb by this scene. He looked at the city wall that was blocked behind him, then at the barbarians who were charging toward him from the front. He felt a pain in his lower abdomen, and he nearly threw up a stream of liquid. The rain of arrows rained down on the heads of those soldiers who were controlling the MO machines. A large number of soldiers howled and fell to the ground. Chapter 59. Satisfying. This is really satisfying. Standing on top of the city wall, Wuxia had a shield wrapped in 3 layers of buffalo hide and lined with half-an-inch thick bronze plate on the inside. He was watching the fierce battle outside the city with a smile on his face. Countless prickles fell from the sky like raindrops, clashing against the shield and producing loud cracking noises. Yet none of them could hurt even a single strand of his hair. The barbarian tide outside the city was terrifying, but it seemed like the attacking barbarians were not united. Different barbarians from different tribes had different plans in mind. For example, if the bird barbarians above their heads had launched their attack earlier, once the soldiers controlling the MO machines were killed, the barbarians on the ground would not have suffered such a great loss. As for those barbarian beast warriors on the east side of the city, they did not unleash their full strength to attack as well. They were just trying to provoke the firepower of the MO machines. Although a large number of wild beasts were killed or wounded, the barbarians controlling the wild beasts did not suffer any loss. The 3 barbarian beast warriors who were killed should be just an accident. If not for the sudden attack from the 10 MO machines on the north side of the city, how could these Gu barbarians who were controlling the poisonous bugs on the west side of the city suffer any loss? All they needed to do was to wait for the poisonous bugs to attack the city, and they did not even need to lift a finger. Among the over 30 barbarian leaders on the south side of the city, a few of them were dancing and jumping with joy. Over 20,000 barbarian soldiers under their command were either killed or wounded. A dozen of them were hesitating, sometimes advancing, sometimes retreating, and they had also lost a small half of their soldiers. There were also 5 barbarian leaders who obviously had the strongest cultivation base, and the magical items they used were the brightest. The over 10,000 soldiers behind them only charged forward for half a mile before quickly retreating. They did not suffer any loss at all. The one who suffered the heaviest loss was the over 10,000 barbarian cavalries on the north side of the city. The barbarian cavalries who were completely wiped out were actually equipped with excellent armors and weapons produced by the Lu Kingdom. On top of that, they were the ones who lost all their men. The mystery behind this was really worth pondering. A few prickles brushed past the edge of the shield and fell to the ground. Wuxia grabbed a few prickles and threw them out of the city. A few tiny venomous snakes were swimming towards the city wall. The prickles that Wuxia threw out had pierced into their vital points, firmly nailing them to the ground. Zhang Hu, who also had a shield on his head, led a large group of soldiers carrying barrels of oil and ran up the wall. A large amount of oil was poured down the wall, followed by a dozen torches. Outside the western city wall, a large area of flames burned, and countless poisonous insects were instantly engulfed in the flames. The venomous insects squeaked as they were burned, and a pungent stench rose into the sky along with billowing black smoke, accompanied by the sound of their bodies exploding. More fuel was poured down the wall, and the entire western wall was surrounded by flames. The ground was soaked in oil more than a foot thick. The large amount of fuel ensured that the fire could burn for at least an hour. With this layer of fire, the poisonous insects in the west of the city were no longer a threat. Those Gu barbarians who were controlling the poisonous bugs let out a shrill whistle. Immediately, a large swarm of poisonous bugs turned towards the north of the city, crazily rushing towards those 10 MO machines. The soldiers controlling the MO machines let out shrill cries of terror and despair. Quickly, they abandoned the slow-moving MO machines and fled towards the north of the city. Wuxia hastily rushed to the northwest corner of the city wall. He grabbed a few oil cans and threw them out with all his strength. Intentionally or unintentionally, the oil cans fell to the ground near the MO machines, and a large amount of fuel splashed onto the MO machines. He threw out a few more torches, and all 10 MO machines were set ablaze on the spot. The dense sound of steel wires breaking kept coming out from the pitch-black shells of the machines. These MO machines were the strategic defensive weapons of the Lu Kingdom, and it was impossible for them to fall into the hands of Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng. Since it was impossible for them to become his, he should destroy them completely. If not for the fact that the 20 MO machines in the west of the city were too far away, Wu Qi wished he could burn them all down. However, what Wu Qi failed to do, those Gu barbarians had done it. Having lost the threat of the 10 MO machines that came from the north, those Gu barbarians, who were surrounded by chilly winds, rushed over joyfully and dragged the 20 MO machines back. Surprisingly, these Gu barbarians stopped attacking the city. Instead, they left behind a large amount of poisonous bugs to keep the defending army of Little Meng City busy, then dragged the MO machines back to the forest. Wu Qi was struck dumb by what he saw. So these Gu barbarians also knew the value of MO machines? Suddenly, the big birds above his head let out a sharp cry. About half of the bird barbarians controlled the birds and quickly chased towards the direction where the Gu barbarians retreated. Before Little Meng City was conquered, it seemed like the barbarians had begun to split up. Thousands of thoughts flashed across Wu Qi's mind. He suddenly understood the purpose of this barbarian tide. They had robbed the barbarians of 3 black stone tablets, and the barbarians had formed an army and were here to take revenge on Little Meng City for the 3 black stone tablets. However, this barbarian tide had been used by some barbarians, becoming a tool to weaken the other tribes. From the beginning, these barbarians were not of one mind. Therefore, the barbarian knights in the north of the city had been annihilated. The barbarian soldiers in the south had suffered a great loss, and the barbarians in the west and east of the city had only lost a large number of wild beasts and poisonous bugs. If not because half of these Gu barbarians were killed by the MO machines due to their carelessness, they should be safe. Now when these bird barbarians saw that the Gu barbarians had gained some benefits, they couldn't wait to fight for the spoils of war. Wu Qi calmed down. This barbarian tide should be easier to overcome than what Zhang Hu and his men had told him. Although these barbarians were all elites, they were just a bunch of elites with ulterior motives. What could they do to Little Meng City? Besides, there was still Luo Kadi and Ma Liang outside the city. Suddenly, a gust of fierce wind came from above. A few bird barbarians on top of the eagles were addicted to killing. They actually let down their mounts and flew towards the top of the city wall. One of the eagles had chosen Wu Qi as its target. Both of its claws grabbed onto the shield above Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi snorted coldly and thrust out his palm. The energy was spinning in his palm, and an invisible whirlpool of air sucked away the airflow underneath the eagle's wings. The eagle suddenly fell down like a heavy rock. 5 bird barbarians, who were laughing evilly on the eagle's back, screamed out in fear. They threw away the bows in their hands and jumped down from the eagle's back. These 5 poor bird barbarians had forgotten that the eagle was 50 feet away from the top of the city wall, and that the wall of Little Meng City was 30 feet away from the top of the city wall. Falling down from 80 feet high, 2 barbarians had their necks broken, and the other 3 had their legs broken. With one swift move, Wu Qi grabbed the eagle's claw, unleashed a bone-piercing cold innate water energy, and sent it into the eagle's body, shattering its internal organs and freezing it into a block of ice. He lifted the eagle up and forcefully smashed it down onto the city wall. 3 bird barbarians who had their legs broken let out a miserable howl, as their bones were broken and tendons torn by the eagle, and they died on the spot. The situation outside the city had turned into a chaotic mess. Under the threat of MO machines, the barbarian soldiers and beast warriors were slowly retreating. The group of beasts that had been charging forward were all slaughtered, and the poisonous insects that had lost control were burnt to a crisp by the fire. Other than the bird barbarian that was still shooting its prickles at the ground, the rest of the barbarians had already retreated to a safe distance. The sound of gears grinding kept ringing out. Suddenly, dozens of tiny holes were opened on the roof of the 30 over MO machines that could still operate. Following a series of twangs of bowstrings, nearly 1,000 crossbows shot up into the sky, reaching a height of over 2,000 feet. The bird barbarians were caught unprepared, and over 300 eagles and eagles were shot down by the crossbows. Their dead bodies fell down from the sky, while the bird barbarians on the backs of the eagles let out a long and miserable howl, then fell onto the ground and turned into a pile of meat paste. It was a complete mess outside Little Meng City. The barbarians were looking at the city from afar. Luo Kadi and Ma Liang had seized the opportunity and gathered all the soldiers who could still fight. Over 30 MO machines had also gathered together, forming a defensive circular formation 2 miles east of the city. With a pale face, Lu Qingfeng climbed up the city wall in a wobbly manner, and came next to Wu Qi. Fortunately, during these days, those clan elders have presented me with some special products from Meng Mountains, including a section of earth and Yin wood. I've used it to make 12 formation pillars, and now, I've deployed the Grand White Gold Dagger formation near all 4 city gates. Whoever dares to break into the city will die for sure. After breaking through to the respiration tier of Xiantian realm, the amount of energy Lu Qingfeng could use had increased greatly, and the density of his energy had improved as well. That made it easier for him to use the little 25th lamp. Just now, when Wu Qi came to the top of the city wall to watch the battle, he had quickly deployed the formation pillars of the Grand White Gold Dagger formation. In just 1 hour he had successfully deployed 4 Grand White Gold Dagger formations near the city gates. Wu Qi nodded his head happily and said, "We don't have to worry about anything this time." Judging from the looks of Luo Kadi and his men, they didn't bring too many arrows with them. With 4 Grand White Gold Dagger formations, we won't have any problem defending the city. The barbarians kept watching Little Meng City from afar. Suddenly, a barbarian leader, who had a grayish-white flying dagger hovering above his head, and was emitting a few feet-long blade beams, was walking slowly towards the city gate where Wu Qi and his men were standing under the protection of a few beast warriors. When he was about 300 feet away from the city, the barbarian leader halted his steps. He stared at Wu Qi and cried out with a loud voice, "Can you make the decision?" Wu Qi gave Lu Qingfeng a look, raised his voice and cried out, "Of course, the mayor is standing right in front of you." The barbarian leader nodded his head and continued to cry out, "You know why we're here. You've stolen the stone tablets of inheritance left behind by our ancestors, and we have to come here. This is the order of the Elder Council of the Brotherhood of Mountains, the strongest clan in Meng Mountains. But we're no match for you. You've killed the knights sent by the Brotherhood of Mountains, and all their soldiers. We want to have a talk with you." "What do you want to talk about?" Wu Qi cried out with a stern voice. The barbarian leader cried out, "Tell us where the men who stole the stone tablets of inheritance have gone, and we'll retreat. Otherwise, we'll have to keep attacking you." The barbarian leader threw a fearful glance at Luo Kadi's men, who had formed into a circular formation, then complained loudly, "If not because you suddenly had those powerful bolts, we would have definitely attacked your city. But now that you have reinforcements, all the soldiers of the Brotherhood of Mountains have been wiped out. You can't blame us for this failure. Tell us where the stone tablets of inheritance have been sent to, and we'll retreat immediately. We won't make things difficult for Little Meng City anymore." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then he turned to look at Lu Qingfeng. While both men were exchanging glances, suddenly, from the only main street that connected Little Meng City to the outside world, a dense, muffled, thunderous clatter of hooves was heard. The ground was shaking, and dust was stirred up in the distance. About 10 minutes later, a team of cavalrymen, clad in heavy greenish-gray armor, and riding on huge strange beasts with 2 horns, was seen approaching at top speed. Behind this team of cavalrymen was a long army of nearly 20,000 men. At the forefront of this team of cavalrymen was a luxurious flying coach, hovering 3 feet above the ground and driven by 3 tricolored deer. A beautiful girl was anxiously poking half of her body out from the window of the coach. Although she was still far away, she had already started calling out loudly, "Chengfeng, my son, don't be afraid. I'm here, and no one can touch even a single hair of yours." Chapter 60. After listening to Tai Yuewu's words for a full 15 minutes, Lu Chengfeng raised his head up and said in an indifferent tone, "After a long period of work, they finally moved away those broken bricks, tiles, beams, and pillars that blocked the city gate, and cleared out 4 paths into the city. A part of the men brought by Tai Yuewu followed her into the city, while the rest of the soldiers set up their camps outside the city." Lu Chengfeng rose to his feet and said with a dry and respectful yet emotionless voice, "Mother, please come to the mayor's mansion. If there's anything you want to discuss, let's discuss it in the mayor's mansion. The smell of blood here is too strong, and it will be disrespectful to Mother." The door on the side of the coach was kicked open by someone with brute force. Tai Yuewu, who was clad in a luxurious black palace dress, looking proud and beautiful like a fiendish phoenix, held her head high and walked slowly out of the coach with the help of 2 serving ladies. Lan Xiazi, who was covered in blue scales and had a 2-feet-long snake tongue sticking out from his mouth, was following beside Tai Yuewu with an air of arrogance, staring at Luo Kedi with his deep and vicious eyes. Tai Yuewu waved her hand in a disgusted manner and said, "You can leave now." Lu Chengfeng walked forward slowly without any change in his expression. He knelt down respectfully on the ground that was covered in blood and mud, kowtowed a few times to Tai Yuewu and said, "Greetings, Mother. May I know what is the purpose of Mother's visit from afar?" Under the command of Tai Yuewu, the mountain-crushing cavalry of Lu family had surrounded the Crocata's cavalry of Yulin army. "Little Meng City is my first foundation in the Lu kingdom. Mother, please guard this place well for me, and don't let anyone invade it." Luo Kedi let out a miserable howl, hugging his thigh that was bleeding profusely and shivering violently. Tai Yuewu sat behind the table placed right in the middle of the hall, and slowly told him the identity of Lu Qingfeng's biological father, as well as what had happened recently. After that, Tai Yuewu continued in an indifferent tone, "For your own good, for your mother's sake, and for the sake of your grandfather's family, you have to return to Ji City with the quickest speed, and inherit everything left behind by your father." Wu Qi felt a chill running down his spine. He sized up Tai Yuewu from top to bottom, and sighed with emotion in his heart. Tai Yuewu sneered. Suddenly, she pointed her finger at Luo Kedi. Lu Qingfeng, who was sitting on the right side of Tai Yuewu with his head lowered, had a calm expression on his face. Tai Yuewu snorted coldly and said, "Luo Kedi, how dare you?" Luo Kedi's facial expression turned ugly. He gritted his teeth and looked at the huge 3-leaved pansy emblem on the chest of the mountain-shattering iron cavalry. He then asked in a cold voice, "Madame Ruyang, what are you doing? Didn't our princess reach an agreement with your Lu family? If the Crocata's cavalry was a surging flame, then the mountain-crushing cavalry would be a stable mountain. Perhaps it was because the Lu family was wealthier than the royal family of the Lu kingdom, but no matter how Wu Qi looked at them, he felt that the armors and weapons of these 8,000 mountain-crushing cavalrymen were much better than those of the Crocata's cavalry of the Yulin royal guards. Tai Yuewu had a bright smile on her face, but in her heart, she was shocked to the extreme. Without the help of his clan, without taking any miraculous pills, and without the personal guidance of a Xiantian realm expert, how did Lu Qingfeng manage to break through into the Xiantian realm? And how did he manage to keep a Xiantian expert by his side? This was simply impossible. Lan Xiazi, who was coiled behind Tai Yuewu, let out a sharp hiss. With lightning speed, she leaped out and bit Luo Kedi's thigh. Luo Kedi let out a miserable howl, and his body suddenly fell to the ground. Ma Liang moved like lightning. He pulled out a dagger and swung it forcefully, slicing off 1 kilogram of flesh from Luo Kadi's thigh, cutting off all the flesh near the bite wound of Lan Xiazi. Tai Yuewu immediately turned to look at Lu Qingfeng with astonishment, then she glared fiercely at Wu Qi. Her pretty face was like a blooming flower in spring. She had a very charming smile on her face as she said, "Oh my dear son, you actually have the cultivation base of Xiantian realm? And, how should I address you, little brother? To be able to reach Xiantian realm at such a young age, what a rare feat." Wu Qi looked curiously at the mountain-crushing cavalry. Their mounts seemed to be a hybrid between a cow and a horse. They had the head of a cow and the body of a horse, and had a sturdy build. There were 2 sharp horns protruding from the top of their heads, and when they were clad in heavy greenish-gray armor, they gave off the impression of a small moving mountain. The mountain-crushing cavalry's cavalrymen were also burly men with exceptionally sturdy builds. They were clad in fully enclosed heavy armor, and each of them held a short mace in their hands. They looked mighty and heavy, and looked extremely intimidating. When Lu Qingfeng saw Tai Yuewu rushing over with the Lu clan's mountain-crushing cavalry, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Hastily, he pulled the baffled Wu Qi along with a group of hangers-on, and selected 3,000 fully armored city guards. Then they moved away the blockage on the city wall, and lined up to greet the mountain-crushing cavalry. The mountain-crushing cavalry opened up a path. Ma Liang hastily bandaged Luo Kadi's wound. Then he bowed respectfully at Tai Yuewu. After that, he hastily led the remaining subordinates and left the encirclement. Over 30 MO machines were left on the same spot, and Ma Liang didn't ask anyone to take them away. The Crocata's cavalry of Yulin army left quickly. Tai Yuewu breathed out a faint sigh, then slowly turned around. Her pretty face, which looked like a 16-year-old beauty, was covered with sparkling and translucent tears. From afar, she spread her arms towards Lu Qingfeng and cried out with a sorrowful voice, "Qingfeng, my dear son, I'm late. Did you suffer any grievances?" A whistling of swords rang out, as 4 6-feet-long sword beams glinting with a bright green gleam shot out, and circled around over 30 MO machines in a blink of an eye. The sword beams pierced into the MO machines from somewhere, accurately killing the soldiers who were controlling the MO machines. Muffled and miserable cries were heard coming out from the MO machines. In just a blink of an eye, over 30 MO machines had lost their threat. Is that so? Then can I travel through the night to Ji City? Muffled footsteps were heard coming slowly. The heaven, earth, and human armies of blood-draining army had dismounted from their horses a few miles away, lining up in an orderly formation, and slowly pressing towards Little Meng City. When they were about 2 miles away from Little Meng City, the 3 armies split up. The heaven and earth armies guarded the north, northwest, south, and southwest sides of Little Meng City, while the human army kept pressing towards Little Meng City. A whistle rang out, and the barbarian army quickly retreated into the woods, especially those bird barbarians, as they ran faster than anyone else. A great amount of feathers came raining down from the sky, and together with the shrill cries of birds, these bird barbarians transformed into a dark cloud and flew away. Tai Yuewu nodded her head slowly. With the help of her serving lady, she returned to the flying coach. Almost instinctively, Luo Kadi raised his right hand up high. Muffled grinding noises of gears were heard coming out from all 30 MO machines. Slowly, they adjusted their angles and locked onto the soldiers of blood-draining army, who were slowly approaching from 2 miles away. When everything had settled down, the night had enveloped the sky. Cries could be heard everywhere in Little Meng City. Those soldiers and civilians who had survived the rain of arrows during the day were working hard with torches, rescuing the wounded and dying from the collapsed houses, and cleaning up those corpses that were shot to death. Tai Yuewu breathed out a long sigh, threw a glance at Wu Qi and his men, smiled joyfully and said, "Are these the men you recruited after you came here? From the looks of it, it does seem like it." Right after she finished her words, one of the 4 old men who had killed the soldiers in the MO machine came up to Tai Yuewu and murmured something in a low voice. With a light snort, a few figures dashed out from the mountain-shattering cavalry. Wu Qi had a clear look at them. They were 4 old men who were clad in a long black robe, and the back of the robe was embroidered with a cloud pattern. Judging from the powerful aura emanating from these 4 old men, They should have the cultivation base of Xiantian Unity God and above. Even in the Lu family of Liang, there weren't many warriors of Xiantian realm. How did Lu Chengfeng do it? In the mayor's mansion, the atmosphere was extremely weird. With a belly full of evil thoughts, Wuxia was sizing up Lu Chengfeng from top to bottom, wondering if the irresponsible father of this young man had such an incredible background. The strongest member of the imperial clan of Great Yin Dynasty? The great-grandson of Emperor Yin Dan? The Duke of Great Yin Dynasty? Didn't that mean that Lu Chengfeng had become one of the core and strongest members of the imperial clan of Great Yin Dynasty? Luo Kadi stopped talking and was about to shout out, but Ma Liang quickly stepped forward and bowed deeply at Tai Yuewu. You're right, madam. General Luo is just taking it for granted. This trip has nothing to do with the princess. I hope madam will be merciful and let us leave. Tai Yuewu sighed lightly, stroked Lu Chengfeng's head tenderly and kindly, and said, Why are you and my mother so strange? Why can't I come and see you if I have nothing to do? But it makes sense, you've been wronged for the past few years. Looking at the severely wounded Luo Kadi with satisfaction, Tai Yuewu nodded her head slowly and said, I won't argue with you about what happened this time. Go back and tell your master, Chengfeng is my son. If he wants to beat or scold him, it will be up to me. No one can use that groundless accusation to kill him. 3 deer pulled the flying coach and arrived at the outskirts of Little Meng City. They circled around the city wall and came in front of Luo Kadi and Ma Liang. Looking at the approaching army, the barbarian leader's face fell. A scarlet-red carpet flowed out from the coach like flowing water, stretching out in front of Tai Yuewu and coming in front of Luo Kadi. With a cold face, Tai Yuewu walked slowly on the soft carpet and came in front of Luo Kadi. With the corner of her eyes, she gazed at Luo Kadi and said, Ridiculous. What right does Princess Yingchuan have to come to an agreement with us, the Lu family? No matter how he looked at her, Tai Yuewu was Lu Chengfeng's younger sister, or even his niece. She didn't look like his biological mother at all. It could only be said that she had taken good care of herself, and Lu Chengfeng looked too mature and experienced. Wu Qi's heart started pounding violently. He recalled what Lu Chengfeng had told him not long ago, something related to the cultivation sects of Great Yin Dynasty. Luo Kadi glared at her and was about to say something, but Ma Liang quickly pulled him back and came in front of Tai Yuewu. He bowed and bowed, laughed dryly and said, We dare not, we dare not. How could we go against madam? Regarding what happened today, we'll just do as madam says. I hope madam won't blame us. We've offended you in some way. For the sake of Her Highness and His Majesty, madam, please let us go. Tai Yuewu tilted her head up proudly and said in an indifferent tone, How dare you go against me with just these emo machines? Luo Kadi, how dare you? The blood-draining army was the strongest army in the border army of the Lu Kingdom. All the soldiers were elites who had gone through hundreds of battles. As the human army approached slowly, an intense murderous aura soared into the sky. Compared to them, the Yulin army, who lived a luxurious life in the Lu Kingdom, was stimulated by the murderous aura and broke out in cold sweat. Chapter 61. On the main road, a line of 12 flying coaches was speeding forward under the protection of several thousand cavalries. This was Lu Chengfeng and his men, who had set out overnight. All the coaches were of the same design, 8 feet wide and 50 feet long. The decorations on the coaches were luxurious and low profile, with a pale golden emblem of a 3-leaved pansy, indicating the identity of the number 1 family of the Lu Kingdom. Underneath the coaches, a formation inlaid with pale green energy stones was glowing brightly, and an invisible airflow was pushing the coaches 3 feet above the ground. Occasionally, some leaves would fall from the woods along the road, but when they were a few feet away from the coaches, they would be blown away by an invisible breeze. 8,000 mountain-crushing cavalries, 500 elite cavalries from the 3rd Battalion of Little Meng City Guards, 600 villagers of Meng Village, and the 2,000 hanger-ons that Lu Chengfeng had recruited in Little Meng City during these few days. This silent troop had more than 13,000 men. Half of the waning moon was hanging high in the sky, and the wind was very strong. Dark clouds would pass by the face of the moon from time to time, and the woods would be dark and bright at times, filling the air with a strange atmosphere. Dense dark fog kept gushing out from the woods on both sides of the road, but it was torn into pieces by the countless torches in the troop. In the third coach, Wuxia was sitting cross-legged in the corner of the coach. The innate water serpent pearl was hovering 3 inches in front of his dantian, and a visible silvery green airflow with a pale blue glow was shooting out from the pearl, rushing into Wuxia's dantian, along with the sound of water ripples. Wuxia's body was covered by a faint layer of water vapor, and a powerful internal energy was rolling around in the coach. Since he had obtained the innate water serpent pearl, Wuxia had spent 12 hours every day absorbing the enormous energy and life essence from the pearl. Over the past 2 months, his cultivation had attempted to reach the peak of respiration tier of Xiantian realm 8 times. Then he forcibly dispersed his cultivation base 8 times, and merged all the innate water energy he had cultivated into his meridians. His meridians had become tougher and stronger, and the innate water energy in his meridians had condensed into a sticky paste. When the innate water energy circulated in his meridians, even Wuxia himself could hear the sound of a rushing waterfall. The scroll of stealing was broad and profound, mysterious and unfathomable. Although Wuxia was still in the respiration tier of Xiantian realm, his innate energy had already reached the level of breath-condensing tier of Xiantian realm. Swallowing and spitting, Wuxia once again absorbed a large amount of energy essence from the serpent pearl. After raising his innate energy to the pinnacle of the respiration tier for the 9th time, Wuxia stopped his cultivation for the day. Currently, his body was still very fragile, and had not reached the level where he could freely devour the sun and the moon, as described in Scroll of Stealing. Therefore, he could not be too hasty in his daily cultivation, or else, it would cause irreversible damage to his corporeal body. Taking a deep breath, Wuxia placed the serpent core into his storage pouch. Then he jumped out of the curtains and looked outside. Zhao Chenzue, who was riding beside the flying car, immediately came over. "Sir, what's the matter?" He turned his head around and looked at the mountain-breaking cavalry, who were charging forward silently with torches in their hands. Wuxia lowered his voice and said, "Inform Zhang Hu, Wei Xiaobai, and the others. Keep your spirits up, keep your eyes open, and follow closely behind young master's coach. Don't fall behind, and be ready to react at any time." Zhao Chenzue answered with a deep voice. He quickly glanced around with his malicious eyes, slowed down his ride, and spread Wuxia's words to his men. Lu Chengfeng, who was using the little 25th lamp to craft an array pillar, breathed out a long sigh of relief. He placed the completed array pillar in front of him, and looked at it with satisfaction. There were 6 array pillars, glinting faintly with a yellow gleam and shrouded in a faint earth element energy. These were the array pillars of the Earth Spirit Armor Array that Lu Chengfeng had the ability to craft after he stepped into the realm of Xiantian. It was the most basic defensive array of the Earth Element Array. He had the Grand White Gold Dagger Array for offense, and the Earth Spirit Armor Array for defense, with one attacking and the other defending. Although Lu Chengfeng only had the cultivation base of respiration tier of Xiantian realm, he could at least handle the joint attack from 2 to 3 warriors of Unity Deity realm, who didn't know anything about arrays. Or put it in another way, he alone could handle the assault from a group of less than 300 elite heavy cavalries. The Tao of Array had always been this magical. Rubbing his palms and shoving the array pillars into the storage pouch, Lu Chengfeng fiddled with the little 25th lamp, then asked thoughtfully, "Wuxia, if I can inherit the title of nobility and fief left behind by that man, what do you want?" Putting down the window curtain, Wuxia leaned lazily on a pile of comfortable fur cushions, smiled and said, "Young master is really considerate. Why don't you recommend me to an immortal sect in Great Yin Dynasty? For those who have reached the realm of Xiantian, who doesn't want to take another step forward?" Lu Chengfeng nodded his head, put down the lamp, looked at Wuxia and said, "All right. All the great noble clans of Great Yin Dynasty will take in some cultivators for their own use. The only person I can rely on and have the aptitude to cultivate is you. With the identity of Zhuguozheng of Great Yin Dynasty, it won't be a problem for me to entrust an immortal sect to cultivate a few trusted cultivators for me." After listening to Lu Chengfeng's words, Wuxia nodded his head satisfyingly. He pondered for a while, then said, "So the most important issue for us now is to ensure that young master can inherit everything left behind by Zhuguozheng. What's the arrangement for young master's mother?" Lu Chengfeng let out a mocking laugh, then lay on the soft brocade mattress with all his limbs spread out. Without caring about his image, he said with an indifferent tone, "My father has personally sent all the assassins of Lu clan to the 9 dynasties to assassinate those nominal brothers of mine, ensuring that I'll be the first one to arrive at Ji City. My maternal grandfather has also sent all the scouts in his army to cooperate with the assassins of Lu clan." Pointing at his own nose, Lu Chengfeng said leisurely, "Wuqi, your young master is now the most popular person in the world." Wuqi nodded his head slowly and said, "If that's the case, we just need to hasten our journey. Besides your mother, maternal grandfather, and the clan leader of Lu clan, who else knows about young master's identity?" Lu Chengfeng said with a cold voice, "Besides you, me, and the 3 of them, no one knows that I'm actually the son of Yin Buji." Wuqi immediately breathed out a sigh of relief. He counted with his fingers and said, "If that's the case, at least before we enter Ji City, we won't be in any danger." The large group of men and horses continued their journey at top speed, following the only main road that led from Little Meng City to the outside world. After traveling for over 400 miles in just one night, they had left the mountainous region of Meng Mountains and entered the flatland outside the mountains. When the sky was about to break, following the deep and muffled clatter of hooves, the large group of men and horses rushed out from the mountains. Suddenly, from a patch of barren land by the roadside, a loud and hoarse cry was heard. The cry sounded like the howl of several hundred wild wolves who were forced into a desperate situation. It was sharp and sonorous, filled with a dreadful aura that could make one's hair stand on end. Wuqi could hear it clearly. Amidst the howl, the clearest voices were the voices of Luo Kadi and Ma Liang. Along with their cries, he could hear the clashing of weapons and the cracking of bodies. Abruptly, Wuqi pulled back the curtain. In a small depression 1 mile away from the roadside, over 30,000 soldiers were besieging the Crocata's cavalry of Yulin army, who had less than 300 soldiers left. The barren land by the roadside was densely covered with dead bodies. Among them, there were several thousand dead bodies of Yulin army and Crocatas, but most of them were dead barbarians clad in fine armors. Occasionally, there were a few dead bodies clad in light green armors, holding long spears in their hands. In that small depression, a large number of barbarian soldiers clad in the standard armor of Lu Kingdom were fighting fiercely with the Crocata's cavalry led by Luo Kadi and Ma Liang. These barbarian soldiers, whose faces were densely covered with all kinds of embroidery and had a ferocious appearance, were letting out strange cries while waving their weapons and charging forward. Even though Luo Kadi and Ma Liang had inflicted a great number of casualties on them, they still refused to retreat. Behind these barbarian soldiers were over 3,000 cavalrymen, riding on slender green beasts. They were clad in light green armors, holding light green long spears in their hands, and had a 6 feet long specially made longbow strapped to their back. The Crocata's cavalry held crazily, their bodies bathed in blood as they fought fiercely with the barbarian soldiers. Each Crocata's cavalry could kill an enemy a few times more than them, but the number of barbarian soldiers here was at least 100 times more than theirs. They were like a small boat floating in the middle of a vast ocean, constantly being slapped by the huge waves. Every time the waves slapped, a few Crocata's cavalry would be torn into pieces by the barbarians. Suddenly, the army halted on the main road. A flying coach stopped right next to Lu Qingfeng's coach. Tai Yuewu lifted up the curtain and gestured at Wu Qi. Wu Qi gave Lu Qingfeng a kick. Only then did Lu Qingfeng crawl up from the ground, poking his head out from the window lazily. "For the sake of you, your maternal grandfather has deployed the most elite troop of the Three Mountains province, the Green Wind Cavalry, to cooperate with the soldiers of Brotherhood of Mountains clan to annihilate the Crocata's cavalry." Wu Qi's heart twitched. He turned to look at Lu Qingfeng and Yi Yan. Marquis Yuanyang was the one who colluded with the strongest clan in Meng Mountains in the Lu Kingdom? If that was the case, what was the intention of Tai Yuewu and the others when they sent Lu Chengfeng to Little Meng City? Lu Qingfeng's face twitched as well, but very soon he put on a filial and humble smile. Tai Yuewu yawned lazily and said in a leisurely manner, "This is for your own good. You have to remember what your maternal grandfather has done for you. If you let Luo Kedi and his men return to the capital, with the cunning of Princess Ying Chuan and the others, it is not difficult for them to figure out your identity. Therefore it is better for them to die here." Lu Qingfeng gazed deeply at Tai Yuewu. Then he cried out in a deep voice, "We could have killed them outside of Little Meng City. Why do we have to do it here?" Tai Yuewu twisted her lips and giggled. "My good boy, your mother loves to see the expression of those people when they are feeling proud of themselves, but when they suddenly find themselves in a desperate situation. Look, Luo Kedi and Ma Liang, aren't they very angry and in despair now?" Lu Qingfeng didn't say anything. On the other hand, Wu Qi felt a chill in his heart. The mentality of Tai Yuewu was almost a pervert. He quickly gave Tai Yuewu a glance. This was a woman with a twisted mentality. The troubles that Lu Qingfeng would face in the future would not be limited to what was happening now. She would try her best to control Lu Qingfeng in her hand, and let Lu Qingfeng use the power he possessed in the future to serve the ambition of her and her clan. Perhaps he should find a way to kill Tai Yuewu in advance. However, she was, after all, Lu Qingfeng's mother. As for Lu Qingfeng, no matter what, he was his friend now. Killing his friend's mother for the sake of his friend and his own benefits? Suddenly, Wu Qi's heart felt heavy, and a sense of guilt came over him out of nowhere. Tai Yuewu giggled, then lightly clapped her hands. Led by 4 Xiantian sinecures of Lu family, 1,000 mountain-crushing cavalry launched an assault towards the Crocata's cavalry led by Luo Kedi and Ma Liang. Chapter 62. Luo Kedi and Ma Liang exchanged a glance. The last strand of disloyalty in their hearts had vanished without a trace. Nowadays, the vassal kingdoms of Great Yan dynasty were in constant disputes, and the territories of these kingdoms were not peaceful either. But for a direct descendant of a wealthy family to travel with over 4,000 guards and hanger-ons, it was a little too exaggerated. But if there were several dozens of carriages of gold and jade jewelry accompanying him, it would make sense. The enormous convoy traveled day and night, braving the wind and rain as they headed towards Ji City. Wu Qi looked at both men and said in an indifferent tone, "In about 20 days, we will arrive at Ji City. Before we arrive at Ji City, you will need at least half a month to circulate your energy and restore your cultivation. Today is your last chance. If you don't submit to our young master today, you will be useless in a few days." From the Lu Kingdom to Ji City, the capital city of Great Yan dynasty, they had to cross through 7 vassal kingdoms, namely the Gaoling Kingdom, Wen Kingdom, Lishan Kingdom, Gao Kingdom, Hu Kingdom, Jilet Kingdom, and the 3 Song Kingdom. Among these 7 kingdoms, the Gaoling Kingdom and the Lu Kingdom were mortal enemies. Every 3 to 5 years, a big or small war would break out between the 2 kingdoms. As for the other 6 kingdoms, they were either on friendly terms or hostile terms. Ignoring the attitude of both men, Wu Qi told them the background of Lu Qingfeng's birth in full detail. He also told them that Lu Qingfeng had gained an absolute advantage in the struggle to inherit Yan Buji's legacy. If nothing unexpected happened, Lu Qingfeng would become the Duke of Great Yan dynasty, the supreme member of the imperial clan, the Zhuguozheng of Great Yan dynasty who possessed a great amount of power. After spending half a year without moving, lying in the carriage like a living dead, Luo Kedi and Ma Liang had been tortured to the point that they would rather be dead than alive. A cultivator who possessed a spirit root and was born with a nascent embryo could break through the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, form the Jin Dan, and become an Earthwalker immortal. Luo Kedi had his eyes fixed on Wu Qi as well. He sneered and said, "What if we insist on not submitting to him?" Facing Lu Qingfeng, who was about to inherit all of Yan Buji's legacy, 2 Xiantian warriors seemed to be nothing. Luo Kedi and Ma Liang were shocked when they heard this. They stared at Wu Qi as if they had just seen a ghost, and couldn't react for a while. The title of lady conferred by Great Yan dynasty was 10,000 times more honorable than the title given to her by the Emperor of Lu Kingdom. Aruf City? That was a small city with a population of less than 50,000 in Aruf Kingdom. In Great Yan dynasty, a top-notch madam would have at least several dozens of big cities as her fief. Wu Qi came next to the two men and sat down cross-legged. Then he helped them up and let them lean against the soft cushion. After 7 months of traveling day and night, 7 months of painstaking cultivation, after using innate water energy to strengthen his meridians 108 times in the respiration tier of Xiantian realm, he finally broke through the meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm. Although his current meridians were wider and tougher than other cultivators of body strengthening tier of Xiantian realm, it didn't stop him from tempering his meridians once again in the meridian cultivating tier. Sitting with his legs crossed, Wu Qi looked at the two men and breathed out a long sigh. Every 7 days, Wu Qi would come over and ask them if they were willing to submit to Lu Chengfeng. But their answer was always the same, cursing and scolding, never showing any respect to Wu Qi. Later on, as their innate energies were sealed for too long, they had no strength left in their bodies, and they were too lazy to scold him. Every time Wu Qi came, they would just snort weakly and ignore Wu Qi. The scroll of stealing was a cultivation technique that was completely different from the orthodox cultivation technique. Gaoling Kingdom, Wen Kingdom, Lishan Kingdom, and all the other vassal kingdoms were left behind. Apart from being blackmailed by some officials along the way in Gaoling Kingdom, which cost them quite a sum of money to pay for the journey, when they passed through other vassal kingdoms, they did not encounter any difficulties. The difference between a warrior and a cultivator was like the difference between bronze and gold, or the difference between a mortal and an immortal. Both men were calculating all the possible changes that could happen in the future. However, Wu Qi was not interested in these calculations. He sprung up, and with just a few leaps, he had arrived at a flying coach at the back of the fleet. Wu Qi gave both men an appraising glance for a long while, and finally, a smile emerged on his face. According to the clan rule of Great Yan Dynasty, once Lu Chengfeng inherited Yan Buji's legacy, she would also be conferred a title by Great Yan Dynasty. Although she was already married, it wouldn't stop her from becoming a true top-notch lady of Great Yan Dynasty. Her son was a duke of Great Yan Dynasty, and thus, the title of lady conferred to her would not be any lower than that of a duke. Perhaps, her title would be comparable to that of a king. Wu Qi said straightforwardly, "With the current overall strength of our young master, we can't guarantee his future benefits. If both of you are willing to submit to our young master, glory, splendor, wealth, and honor will be yours. If not, I'll cripple your cultivation base right now." Once Lu family replaces the Lu kingdom's royal family, it will be inevitable that your entire clan will be wiped out. These two men were Luo Kadi and Ma Liang. Great Yan Dynasty, the Great Yan Dynasty that was established over 2,000 years ago. Its emperor was called Yan Dan, and it had a group of famous ministers, whose names were Jing Ku, Gao Jianli, and Qin Wuyang. As a warrior, without any spirit root, his cultivation base was at most embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm. Even without entering the coach, Wu Qi could sense the wild ambition that was emanating from Tai Yuewu's body. Perhaps, when Lu Chengfeng inherited everything left behind by Yan Buji, the Lu kingdom would have to change its name to Lu Kingdom. 7 months later, when the mounts of the cavalrymen had become much thinner, and the once strong and sturdy mounts had become so skinny that they could be burned as firewood, the company finally left the Three-Song Kingdom and entered the territory of Great Yan Dynasty. From here, there was an official road, passing through 13 provinces and 378 cities. After traveling for over 33,500 miles, they would arrive at the capital city of Great Yan Dynasty, Ji City. If you don't submit, I'll cripple your cultivation base, and let you witness how your entire clan is killed with your own eyes. Tai Yuewu lowered her head and squeezed into the coach. Then she let out a joyful laugh and said, "Chengfeng, among those competitors of yours, there are only 3 of them left now. All the others have been killed. Now they are still half a month away from the territory of Great Yan Dynasty. If nothing goes wrong, all the belongings left behind by your father will be yours now." Over 7 months ago, Tai Yuewu had commanded the mountain-shattering cavalry to wipe out their army. For Xiantian sinecures from Lu clan had besieged both of them, severely wounded them, and captured them alive. Under the request of Wu Qi, both of them had their Dantian's energies sealed, and were confined in the coach. They had been traveling with the company for over 7 months. After a long while, Ma Liang said with a dry voice, "Since we are going to submit to young Master Lu as our hanger-on, are we really going to meet him like this?" Fearing that Lu Qingfeng's identity would be discovered by the people from the vassal kingdoms along the way, after they left the territory of Lu Kingdom and entered the territory of Gaoling Kingdom, the company that escorted Lu Qingfeng had changed their outfits. The fine armors used by the military were replaced by the armors used by the wealthy commoners, and all the mounts and weapons were changed accordingly. Even the emblem on the 12 flying coaches had been changed to the emblem of a wealthy clan in Lu Kingdom, the clan that specialized in the ironware business, the Tao clan. A few burly men from Meng village who were sitting cross-legged in the corner of the coach smiled and nodded their heads. They rose and walked out from the coach, standing behind the coachman. Wuxia rose to his feet and glanced at the vast and boundless land around him. Slowly, a stream of water vapor sprayed out from his mouth to a distance of 30 feet. The fist-sized innate water serpent pill rolled up into the air, obediently flying back into his storage bag from his dantian. Suddenly, a melodious cry of an eagle was heard coming from the sky. A small white eagle swooped down from the sky, transformed into a white beam, and squeezed into Tai Yuewu's coach. After a while, Tai Yuewu suddenly walked out from the coach with a loud laugh. With just one step, she came up to Lu Qingfeng's coach. After entering the coach, Wuxia took out a flint and lit up the white candle on the candlestick placed at the corner of the coach. Under the guise of going to Ji City to study, Lu Qingfeng and his company of over 4,000 men were traveling at the fastest speed towards Ji City. Wuxia stared at Luo Kadi and Ma Liang, who had an unsightly expression on their faces, mockingly, and said, "To be honest, 2 Xiantian warriors do not mean much to our young master. You are not cultivators of Xiantian realm. You should know very well the difference between the value of a warrior and a cultivator." Lu Qingfeng's cold voice was heard coming from the coach. He and Tai Yuewu began to calculate how they could smoothly obtain the things left behind by Yin Buji. Although the imperial family court of Great Yin Dynasty had made a decision that the child of Yin Buji who arrived at Ji City first would inherit everything he had, who knew if there were any changes in the decision? To many people in Great Yin Dynasty, the fief of 2 provinces was a great temptation. Ma Liang fixed his gaze on Wuxia and said with a deep voice, "No matter what, we are still Xiantian grandmasters." With the speed of the convoy, they would arrive at Ji City in 20 days if they traveled day and night. If not because those wagons loaded with gold and jade jewelry had slowed down the convoy, they could have arrived at their destination a few days earlier. Our young master needs both of you to join him. Sitting on the roof of the flying vehicle, Wuxia had been holding his breath for 7 months, and his internal organs were burning with anger, while his 7 apertures were about to burst into flames. He stared blankly at the vast flatland that stretched as far as the eyes could see. This was the territory of Great Yin Dynasty, the territory of Great Yin Dynasty built by Crown Prince Dan, Jingku, Gao Jianli, Qin Wuyang, and a few other hanger-ons. Wuxia had no idea if this Crown Prince Dan was the same person he knew, and he had no idea if Jingku, Gao Jianli, and Qin Wuyang were the people he had read about in the history books. But the world was so vast, how could there be such a coincidence? Luo Kadi and Ma Liang, who had a messy beard, a haggard face, and a pair of bulging eyes that made them look big and bright, stared fixedly at Wuxia. Luo Kadi laughed with a hoarse voice and said, "Wuxia, are you trying to persuade us again? Hee, we will never betray the Marquis. Even if we have to die, we will never submit to Lu Qingfeng. Asking us to be his hanger-ons? Impossible." Wuxia shook his head and said, "So what? You have lost too badly, and you have no right to consider the issue of face." Tai Yuewu's laughter was filled with endless complacency. The window of the coach was blocked by a thick blanket, and one couldn't even see their own fingers in the coach. The dim light lit up, and the 2 men lying in the middle of the carriage suddenly grunted softly. Their bodies moved unnaturally a few times, and their eyes were stimulated by the light. They hurriedly blinked their eyes. Wuxia waved his hand lightly and coughed under his breath. Chapter 63. After traveling for 19 days in the territory of Great Yan Dynasty, Wuxia and his company finally arrived at Ji City. Ji City was the capital city of Great Yan Dynasty. Over the past 2,000 years, it had gone through 15 times of expansion. During each expansion, the original city wall would be strengthened, and another city wall would be built a few miles away from the original city wall, enclosing a larger area of the city. Therefore, from the outermost city wall to the innermost palace wall, Ji City had a total of 17 layers of high walls. 30 years ago, Ji City had just gone through its latest expansion. The newest layer of city wall measured 180 miles in both width and length. Amidst the thin morning mist, the tall city wall looked like a sleeping dragon, lying quietly on this boundless flatland. Each layer of the city wall was 150 feet tall and 100 feet thick. It was entirely constructed with the extremely sturdy black glowing rock. Between the rocks, a solution of 5 metals was poured, making the city wall even more indestructible. On the surface of this black glowing rock, which was twice as sturdy as a diamond, there were also many runes of earth element engraved on it, constantly extracting the natural energies from the underground energy veins to strengthen the city wall. From time to time, the city wall would emit a pale yellow gleam, making it look very frightening. On top of the city wall, there was an archer tower that stood 1,000 feet tall every 2 miles. The archer tower measured 100 feet in both width and length, and had a total of 9 floors. A great number of MO machines and ballistae were deployed on top of them, giving them a frightening lethality. Inside the city wall, there were countless hiding holes and tunnels. One could even see with naked eyes peepholes, holes for spears and holes for arrows. Looking at these pitch-black holes would send a chill down one's spine. As the army approached the city wall of Ji City, Wuxia could feel his heart beating faster and faster. His blood was rushing and flowing in his veins, making him feel dizzy. Instinctively, he felt that something would happen in this huge capital city, something that would have a great impact on him, or even the entire Great Yan Dynasty. Taking a deep breath, Wuxia pointed his finger at a wooden talisman hanging on his waist. A few simple runes on the wooden talisman flickered with a bright light, and a faintly discernible force spread out from the wooden talisman, covering the ripples of Wuxia's innate energy. From the looks of it, Wuxia was just an ordinary martial artist with 30 to 40 years of inner force cultivation. Lu Chengfeng, Luo Kadi, and Ma Liang also injected a stream of innate qi into the wooden talismans hanging on their waists, concealing the aura of their inner energy. The 4 aura-concealing talismans were personally made by Lu Chengfeng. They were also the last practical talisman that Lu Chengfeng knew besides the Earth Spirit Armor Array and the Grand White Gold Saber Array. With the help of the chief steward of the Tao clan of the Lu Kingdom, the procession entered Ji City smoothly. The soldiers at the city gate did not even check if there were any contraband items in the convoy, and just let them into the city. Ji City was the heartland of Great Yan Dynasty, and several 100,000 soldiers were stationed here all year round. There were countless personal guards from various prestigious clans living in the city, and no one knew how many experts were hiding in the city. Wuxia and his company were merely 4,000 guards. For the enormous Ji City, they were like a drop of water thrown into a great lake, unable to stir up any ripples. The enemy did not take them seriously at all. They marched along the main road that was 300 feet wide, passing through 13 layers of city walls. After that, Wuxia and his company could no longer move forward. As they walked further into the city, the people who lived in the heart of the city were all the nobles of Great Yan Dynasty, who came from the vassal kingdoms under Great Yan Dynasty. A direct descendant of an ordinary wealthy merchant had no right to enter the heart of the city. After a period of bustle, the Lu clan of Liang had bought a large mansion in the city, which could accommodate over 5,000 people. Welcomed by the chief steward of Liang Lu clan in Ji City, the procession was stationed in the mansion. After that, Wuxia immediately ordered Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, and a few other men to arrange the guards on duty. After hastily taking a bath and changing her clothes, Tai Yuowu immediately sent the chief steward of Lu clan in Ji City, Lu Qiulua, to lead the way. Together with 3 carts of gold and jade jewelry, they rushed to pay a visit to the current patriarch of Great Yan Dynasty, the Duke of Yanqing, Yu Xian. The Duke of Yanqing, Yu Xian, was the 392nd grandson of Emperor Yen Dan. He was good at scheming, loved money and women, and valued profit over righteousness. He held the great power of Great Yin Dynasty's imperial family court, and was responsible for supervising the birth, aging, sickness, and death of all the princes and grandsons of Great Yin Dynasty, the punishment and rewards, and the change of titles of nobility. If she wanted Lu Chengfeng to smoothly inherit Yen Buji's title of nobility, fief, and all the official positions, she would have to bribe Yuxian. Wu Qi and his company entered the city early in the morning. It took them a long time to get to the city, and when everyone finally settled down, it was already past noon. When Tai Yuewu took a bath and changed her clothes, checked the 3 carts of gold and jade jewelry, and paid a visit to Yuxian, it was already close to evening. It was an urgent matter, and the longer she delayed, the more variables would appear. Therefore, even though Tai Yuewu knew it was not proper to pay a visit to a duke of Great Yin Dynasty in such an abrupt manner, she couldn't care less about it. There was no news from Tai Yuewu ever since she left. From evening till the moon hung high up in the sky, Tai Yuewu didn't come back, and neither did she send any guards to inform Wu Qi. Gradually, not only Lu Chengfeng, even Wu Qi began to feel a little anxious. Lu Chengfeng was sitting in the main hall with both hands hidden under the table. His fingers were trembling violently. On the other side, Wu Qi had his hands clasped behind his back, walking slowly in the courtyard like a fish swimming in the water. His footsteps were light, but he didn't stir up any dust or make any noise. Sometimes he would raise his head and look at the sky, and sometimes he would turn his head and look at Lu Chengfeng. His brows were tightly knitted together. After waiting for another hour, Wu Qi also felt something was wrong. He stomped his feet heavily and said with a deep voice, "Apart from Lu Qiuluo, who else knows where the imperial family court is? Get someone here, bring me there, and show me the way." Lu Chengfeng jumped to his feet, shook his head and said, "You can't do that, you can't do that. This place can't be compared with Little Meng City. There are countless formidable warriors in Ji City, and there are more than 100,000 soldiers patrolling at night. Rumor has it that there are real cultivators patrolling at night in the inner city. You can't go out there." Wu Qi stomped his feet again, then with a deep voice he cried out, "So where did they go? No matter what the result is, they should at least give me a reply, right?" While both men were having a discussion, Zhang Hu suddenly came into the courtyard in a hurry. He bowed at Lu Chengfeng and said hastily, "Young master, brother Wu Qi, a few servants from the imperial family court have brought Madame Seal here. They want to invite young master to the imperial family court in secret for a discussion." Lu Chengfeng was overjoyed. He quickly pulled Wu Qi and walked out of the courtyard. Wu Qi hastily turned his head and greeted them. Luo Kadi and Ma Liang exchanged a glance, then quickly followed behind them. Outside the main hall of the first courtyard of the mansion, a few men clad in black cloaks with their faces covered were standing quietly under the eaves. Upon hearing the footsteps of Wu Qi and his men, the few men quickly turned around and handed over a thumb-sized, dark red jade seal to Wu Qi. "Are you young Master Chengfeng? Following the order from my master, we're here to invite young master to the mansion for a secret discussion." Together with the seal, there was also a token made from gold, silver, copper, iron and tin. The palm-sized token was fully engraved with patterns of wind and clouds. Amidst the wind and clouds, a green bird was seen flying high up in the sky. On the back of the token, a small character G was engraved in the middle of a bright sun. Lu Chengfeng took over the seal and gave it a quick examination. It was indeed the personal seal of Tai Yuewu. Meanwhile, Wu Qi took over the token. Although it did not look big, it was very heavy. He gave it a thorough examination, and sure enough, the words Great Yin Dynasty's Imperial Grandmaster, Yuxian were engraved on the edge of the token. Weighing the token in his hand, Wu Qi asked, "Why didn't one of the personal guards of the madam come with you?" The man answered with an indifferent tone, "Do you think anyone can walk freely in Ji City during the night? One more person, one more trouble." He sneered, then continued with an arrogant tone, "Even for you, when we enter the inner city later, you will have to hide in the coach. Don't make any noise and don't move. If you cause any trouble, don't blame us for not doing anything." Young Master Chengfeng, don't forget your current identity. You're still the eldest young master of Liang Lu clan. Lu Qingfeng snorted lightly, then he turned to look at Wu Qi. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and said with a low voice, "Our young master will need to bring a few personal guards with him." The man in black gave Wu Qi and the others a glance, then said with an indifferent tone, "Apart from young Master Chengfeng, it would be best if there are no more than 4 personal guards. The coach we brought here is too small, and we can't fit too many people." Wu Qi pointed at himself, Luo Kadi, and Ma Liang, then said with an indifferent tone, "Just the 3 of us will serve our young master." The few men in black nodded their heads at Chi-Chi. Without saying anything more, they pulled the cloaks that covered their faces, spun and walked out of the mansion. In the shadow outside the mansion, a small double-wheeled coach painted with black paint was waiting for them. Wu Qi and company boarded the coach. A few men in black surrounded the coach, and the wheels rattled as they drove toward the inner city. Along the way, there were patrols of soldiers passing by, but when they saw a light green lantern hanging on the shaft of the coach, they pretended they didn't see the coach and let them pass. The few men in black did have a great authority, as all the city gates of G City had been locked at this moment. Without alerting anyone, they opened 2 small side doors on the city wall, and went straight into the inner city. The streets in the inner city of G City were still the same as they were 2,000 years ago. The widest street was no more than 30 feet. Both sides of the street were occupied by the princes and nobles of Great Yin Dynasty. The walls were over 100 feet tall, which made the street look even narrower. The few men in black drove the coach to take a detour, and finally turned into a remote alley. The coach stopped abruptly. Wu Qi, who had been observing the surroundings through a slit in the window, was startled. It was completely dark here, and there wasn't even a door. How could this be the imperial family court? Hastily he asked in a low voice, "My friends, where is this place?" The few men in black laughed at Chi-Chi, then suddenly spun and leaped into the darkness. Wu Qi was startled. He let out a loud cry and kicked the door of the coach. A muffled sound rang out, and the door shattered into countless debris. Wu Qi sprung out from the coach. Amidst the darkness, several dozens of strong gusts approached soundlessly. In just a blink of an eye, they had arrived next to Wu Qi and enveloped his entire body. More strong gusts came assaulting the coach. The harsh cold air made Lu Qingfeng and the other 2 men in the coach break out in cold sweat. Chapter 64. The Inner City of G City. On the east side of the Imperial Palace of Great Yin Dynasty, there was a courtyard that occupied an area of over 1,500 acres. The garden behind the courtyard had a small hill and flowing water, a dense forest, and a garden with palaces and pavilions. It looked luxurious and luxurious. However, the 3-layered courtyard in front of the courtyard was simple and unadorned. All the houses were constructed with huge trees and rocks, and there were no decorations on the exterior of the houses. Patches of moss could be seen everywhere in this 3-layered courtyard, which made the houses look very old and ancient, and gave them a gloomy and ancient feeling. Tai Yuewu was sitting in a hall in the front courtyard, tasting a bowl of tea that looked no different from boiled water. The quality of the tea was very poor. It was coarse, dry, and came with a strong bitter taste. If not for Lu Qiuluo leading the way, Tai Yuewu would never believe that this was the mansion of Great Yin Dynasty's Imperial Grandmaster, Duke Yenxing Yuxian. She would have thought that this was the residence of some peddler. The hall was about 100 feet wide, and it was spacious and tall. However, there were not many furnishings in the hall. Apart from a piece of worn-out red carpet on the floor, bronze candlesticks placed at the 4 corners of the hall, and a few broken tables with their paint peeling off, there was nothing else in the hall. The floor of the hall was uneven. When Tai Yuewu entered the hall, she saw 2 mushrooms growing on top of the rotten threshold. Although there were 4 large bronze candlesticks in the hall, each of them was lit with only 3 white candlesticks the size of a little finger. The hall was so spacious, yet there were only so many candles, and the light was really dim. Tai Yuewu stretched out her hand, but she could barely see her own fingers. Coupled with the patches of moss in the courtyard, the broken furnishings, and the 2 mushrooms growing on the threshold, How could this still be the mansion of a duke of Great Yin dynasty? Obviously, it was a haunted mansion that had not been inhabited by anyone for several hundred years, and had been haunted by ghosts for over 100 years. A few serving ladies were standing in the hall, looking weak and feeble, skinny like a reed, with potholes all over their bodies and staring blankly like zombies. It made the hall look no different from a haunted mansion. The clothes worn by these few serving ladies were made from coarse linen. Not only were they not washed properly, there were many patches on their sleeves. While frowning, Tai Yuewu gave these few serving girls a few more glances, twitched her mouth, picked up the teacup, and poured a few mouthfuls of bitter tea into her mouth. How did Wuxian Mansion manage to find these few maidservants? This world's world spirit qi was extremely abundant, and there were a lot of beautiful girls in this world. On the contrary, it was very difficult to find a few ugly girls. Wuxian's butler must have put in a lot of effort to find these maids who looked like moldy potatoes. Tai Yuewu sighed inwardly and shook her head lightly. As soon as she entered the city, she immediately took a bath and changed her clothes before rushing to Wuxian Mansion. This kind of behavior was not in accordance with etiquette, but in a hurry, she couldn't care less. She successfully entered Wuxian's mansion, and was brought to this hall by the butler to wait for Wuxian's audience. However, from dusk until the moon hung high in the sky, Wuxian did not show up. Not even a single person of status came out to give her an explanation. In her sleeve, Tai Yuewu clenched her fists tightly. In the Lu Kingdom, who dared to neglect her like this? However, this was the Great Yin dynasty, the suzerain of over 100 vassal kingdoms under the heaven. Furthermore, Wuxian was the man who held the power in the imperial family court of Great Yin dynasty, and he had the important power to supervise all the kingdoms under the heaven. Putting aside the fact that Tai Yuewu was left hanging here, even if he did something more outrageous, she could only endure it obediently. Tai Yuewu breathed out a silent sigh, picked up the teacup, and gulped down all the tea in it. A serving lady with an ugly appearance, with a thumb-sized black sarcoma growing on her chin, came up to Tai Yuewu with a silly smile on her face. She grabbed the teapot and poured Tai Yuewu a cup of tea that had turned white. The action of this serving lady was crude and reckless, causing the tea to splash out from the teapot and stain Tai Yuewu's skirt. Tai Yuewu resisted the urge to slap this serving lady to death, gave her a charming smile, nodded her head lightly at the serving lady and said, "Thank you for your hard work, young lady." The serving lady giggled a few times at Tai Yuewu, then picked up the teapot and walked back to her original spot. She stood there with a blank expression like a wooden statue. Tai Yuewu lowered her head and rolled her eyes without anyone noticing. Looking at the water stain that was slowly spreading on her exquisite and expensive palace dress, all the muscles in her body tightened. Her fingers were clenched tightly into fists under her sleeves, and with great effort, she managed to restrain the evil intention in her heart. The front courtyard of the imperial family court was old and dilapidated, looking like a haunted house, but the back courtyard was a luxurious garden. Behind an abode constructed with golden cassia wood, there was a large pool that was excavated in the open air. The bottom of the pool was carved out using mutton fat jade, and the surface of the pool was densely inlaid with several thousands of gemstones of various colors. A tall and skinny old man was seen sprinting on top of a fair and delicate body with all his strength. The sweet moaning of the old man drifted far away with the wind, making one's heart itch. An old man with a fair face and no facial hair, tender skin, and a face that looked like a peeled egg, was standing at the edge of the pool with a big smile on his face, staring at the skinny old man without blinking. After a full half an hour, the skinny old man finally let out a long sigh of satisfaction. His body trembled a few times, then he slowly straightened his back from the soft and delicate body. The old man rubbed the fair and delicate body with all his strength. Although skinny, he had a beautiful face that looked like an immortal. He asked with an indifferent tone, "Is that girl from Lu family still here?" The old man smiled and said, "Yes, she is. I've asked someone to inspect the 3 coaches she brought here just now. There are no common things like gold or silver in them, but only pearls, hawksbill turtles, energy stones, beast cores, and some other good stuff. Although the number is not much, I think its value should be at least 3 million gold coins." The skinny old man, the imperial grandmaster of Great Yin Dynasty, Duke Yin Xinggong Yuxian, had his eyes lit up and said, "Oh, 3 million gold coins? This is just a small clan in the Lu Kingdom, but they do have some wealth." Yuxian let out a long sigh and patted the body of the girl he was sitting on. He stood up, frowned and said, I've miscalculated. I thought that a small clan in the Lu Kingdom, who only brought 3 coaches worth of stuff, could not be worth much. That's why I left her there. I didn't expect that there were actually 3 million gold coins. This is a heavy gift. She brought such a heavy gift to me, yet she neglected it. If this news gets out, my reputation will be ruined. The old man laughed dryly and explained in a low voice, I can't blame you, my lord. It's my fault for not doing my job well. The things in those 3 coaches are not ready-made gold or silver. As for how much those treasures are worth, I can't tell for sure, can I? That's why I asked 2 old shopkeepers who are knowledgeable in treasures to help me appraise them. It took me a long time to finish appraising the value of all the treasures in those 3 coaches. Yuxian sighed, shook his head and said, No, it's still not right. I've miscalculated today. If this news gets out, my reputation will be ruined. Hurry up and help me change my clothes. I need to get this done as soon as possible. More than a dozen naked and charming young girls quickly walked out and helped Yuxian quickly change his clothes. Blinking his eyes for a few times, Yuxian pulled the few strands of beard on his chin, frowned and pondered for a while, then strode to a big tree next to the abode. He picked up a pebble the size of a toddler's head from under the tree, then fiercely smashed it on his own face. A miserable howl rang out, as Yuxian had smashed his nose, causing 2 streams of blood to spray out. Yuxian sighed lightly, then signaled the serving ladies to quickly stop the nosebleed. After that, he carefully applied some makeup on his face. Looking at the puddle of blood on the ground, Yuxian breathed out a long sigh and said, Is it easy to earn some money in these days? I'm a duke, the imperial grandmaster of Great Yin Dynasty. For the sake of 3 million gold coins, for the sake of my reputation, I have no choice but to do this. Shaking his head, Yuxian asked the old man in red robes, How much did you sell the information about Lu Qingfeng for? The old man hurriedly took a few steps forward, smiled and said, The information about Lu Qingfeng was sold for 10,000 gold coins, and the imperial family court token you made privately was sold for 50,000 gold coins. Don't worry, I've done everything well. The 60,000 gold coins have already been deposited into the inner treasury. Yuxian nodded his head satisfyingly, pulled his burlap clothes, breathed out a long sigh and said, That's good. Isn't it just to earn some money? Do you think it's easy for me? Just when Tai Yuewu was about to lose her patience from waiting, and was thinking about how she could take revenge on Yuxian, she heard a light cough coming from behind the screen in the hall. Yuxian, who had a bloody nose and a swollen face, and there were even streaks of blood under his nose, walked out in a sorry state with the help of 2 ugly maidservants. Before Tai Yuewu could stand up and greet him, Yuxian hastily came up to her, cupped his fist and apologized. I'm ashamed. Today, when I entered the palace to discuss some business, I accidentally fell from my mount and hurt my face. I've just woken up. Thank you for waiting for me for so long. I'm really ashamed. Looking at Yuxian's sunken nose, Tai Yuewu was shocked. She quickly rose to her feet with a smile on her face and said, You're being too polite, old master. Rongyang has been waiting for a long time. And the reason why Rongyang paid me a visit is because of my son Chengfeng. In those years, Rongyang and Lord Zhuguozheng. When she said this, Tai Yuewu's face blushed, as if she wanted to say something, but stopped. Before Tai Yuewu could finish her words, Yuxian said impatiently, I understand. Tomorrow I'll do it for you. Chengfeng is the blood descendant of Great Yin Dynasty, and he is my grandnephew. We are not strangers. After a few laughs, Yuxian let out a long laugh and said, Buji doesn't have any legitimate son, but he has left many descendants outside. We all know about that. Whichever son of Buji arrives in Ji City first will inherit his title of nobility and fief. This is also the decision made by the imperial family court. The sanctimonious Yuxian's lustful eyes quickly ran over Tai Yuewu's voluptuous breasts. In a righteous manner, he said, as long as it is verified that young Master Chengfeng is the blood descendant of Buji, he will be the Zhuo Guozheng of Great Yin Dynasty. All these are my responsibilities, and yet, you still brought me 3 carts of gifts. You are treating me like an outsider. Before Tai Yuewu could say anything, Yuxian laughed out loud and said, don't do this again. I've always been an honest and upright man, and I won't take any of these ill-gotten gains. However, since Chengfeng is my grandnephew, I'll make an exception and accept these 3 carts of local products. Little wooer, please keep the gifts brought by Madam into the storeroom. No matter what, they are Madam's sincerity. The old man answered hastily, then ordered his servants to drive the 3 carts into the inner courtyard. Yuxian stared at Tai Yuewu with a smile on his face, who had a strange expression on her face. With a complacent expression, he said, if not because of Chengfeng, I would never accept the gifts brought by Madam. Madam, please take a look at this shabby courtyard of mine, and my clothes are so simple and crude. Normally, this duke doesn't take even a single cent of ill-gotten gains. A strong wind blew across, causing the lamps in the hall to sway and extinguish. Yuxian's coarse linen robe was blown up by the strong wind, revealing the luxurious underwear he was wearing, which was made from 1,000-year-old ice silk, and a few buttons made from top-grade gemstones on his underwear. The quiet night of Ji City was suddenly broken by a loud noise. Chapter 65. Concentrating his innate water energy into his eyes, Wuxia could clearly see what was coming at him from the darkness. It was a few dozens of triangular wind-breaking awls, each as thick as a finger and over a foot long. They were jet black and had an anti-reflective surface. These oddly shaped wind-breaking awls were exquisitely designed, and the craftsmanship was extremely high. They were shot out with a powerful mechanism at an extremely fast speed, and did not make any sound while flying. If not for the fact that he had already entered the Xiantian realm, and gained a preliminary divine sense, Wuxia would not have been able to sense these things approaching him. He let out a breath and released his innate water energy from his body. A layer of flexible and dense gang energy covered his entire body. After that, Wuxia thrust out 2 palms and greeted the few wind-breaking awls that were less than 10 feet away from him. Activating the hand of web, an invisible whirlpool of air swept out, and a strange whistling sound of wind immediately rang out in the air. The sound of ripping cloth was heard. The 2 whirlpools that Wuxia thrust out were easily pierced through by the wind-breaking awls, and the 10 feet protective gang energy that he had released outside his body was also easily broken by the wind-breaking awls. Not only that, the wind-breaking awls went against Wuxia's gang energy, increasing its speed by 30% and shooting down like a bolt of lightning. These things could break gang energy. A blue light swirled in Wuxia's eyes, and he suddenly saw the tiny talisman engraved on the surface of the wind-breaking awls. They were called wind-breaking talismans. These talismans were originally used on magical treasures like flying swords, specifically used to break the natural gang energy at high altitudes and increase the flying speed of flying swords. Surprisingly, they also had a miraculous effect when used on a warrior's gang energy. He also saw a faintly discernible black light at the tip of these wind-breaking awls. The sharpest tip of these wind-breaking awls was actually forged with a rare material called netherwind iron. This kind of millennium dark iron was a unique metal that could only be produced after absorbing the nether energy from underground for 100 years. It was also specialized in breaking gang energy of warriors. Wuxia let out a strange cry. He did not dare to fight head-on. Holding his head with both hands, his body shrunk abruptly, turning into a meatball less than 2 feet in size. Then he rolled and rolled on the ground, leaving a gust of wind behind him. Followed by a series of sizzling noises, tens of wind-breaking awls stuck close to Wuxia's body and pierced into the ground, leaving tens of bottomless holes on the ground. After a series of messy flips, Wuxia rushed to the side of the carriage where Lu Qingfeng and the other 2 were. He kicked the carriage towards the entrance of the alleyway. An enormous amount of zhenqi burst out, pushing the heavy carriage back for over 100 feet. Nearly 100 wind-breaking awls rained down in a messy manner, creating a large area of densely packed small holes on the ground. A loud boom rang out, and the carriage exploded. Lu Qingfeng, Luo Kedi and Ma Liang dashed out from the shattered carriage. As experienced as Luo Kedi and Ma Liang were, when they dashed out from the carriage, they immediately stuck close to the walls on both sides. On the other hand, Lu Qingfeng leaped into the air in an awe-inspiring manner. With a trembling voice he cried out, "Who is the thief that dares to stab me in the back? Aren't you afraid of the law of Great Yin Dynasty?" Looking at Lu Qingfeng, who was so awe-inspiring, Wuxia was so frightened that cold sweat broke out from his body. He let out a strange cry, and his body that had shrunk into a meatball suddenly sprung up. Compared to Lu Qingfeng, his speed was 2 times faster. He grabbed onto Lu Qingfeng's ankle and forcefully threw him down to the ground. Lu Qingfeng cried out in fear as he was thrown down to the ground by Wuxia. Helplessly, Wuxia was sent flying up another 10 feet into the air along with the rebounding force. Suddenly, a light shout was heard coming from the top of the pitch-black wall. "Attack!" A muffled boom rang out, as if a small steel cannon was firing right next to Wuqi's ears. 3 heavy crossbows, each as thick as a toddler's arm and measuring 13 feet long, were thrusting towards Wuqi's chest with an ear-splitting whistle. These heavy crossbows were entirely forged with tungsten steel, and they were extremely heavy. It was unknown what kind of insane crossbow mechanism was used to shoot them out. Furthermore, the speed of these crossbows was 2 times faster than the wind-breaking awls. "Get out of the way!" Lu Qingfeng let out a wild cry. Right when he stood up from the ground, he immediately saw 3 heavy crossbow bolts shooting towards Wuxia. He couldn't help but be scared out of his wits. As Wuxia was hovering in midair, he couldn't exert any force, and there was no room for him to dodge. Abruptly, a cold blue gleam flashed across his eyes, as both of his hands quickly drew circles in front of his face. Innate water energy surged out from his body, transforming into dozens of rapidly spinning invisible whirlpools in front of him. The air was spinning at an incredible speed, producing an ear-splitting whistling noise. The friction between the air and the air brought up a faint white air explosion. In the blink of an eye, the 3 crossbow bolts had arrived less than 3 feet in front of Wuxia. A loud boom rang out, as the 3 heavy crossbow bolts made from tungsten steel suddenly twisted into a twisted dough twist, then were rolled and spun by the invisible whirlpools in the air. The twisted crossbow bolts brushed past Wuqi's body and flew for nearly half a mile away. Wuxia felt a tremendous force coming right at his face, as if both of his hands had been brutally smashed by a heavy hammer. His innate water energy trembled violently, causing the innate energy inside his body to be thrown into disorder. A mouthful of blood sprayed out from Wuqi's mouth, and with the momentum of the heavy crossbow bolts, he was sent flying backward for over 200 feet. Letting out a raging roar, Wuqi's bravery burst out, and he suddenly let out a loud laugh. While laughing hysterically, he took out 2 9-cloud-piercing crossbows from the storage bag tied around his waist. Along with a series of cracking noises, 18 pure steel crossbow bolts were shot towards the direction where the heavy crossbow bolts came from. The crossbow bolts disappeared into the darkness, and suddenly, a shrill howl came from over 1,000 feet away. The sound of the crossbow bolts piercing through human flesh and bones was ear-piercing, followed by a muffled thud. Someone must have fallen from the top of the wall, and fallen to the ground. Casually, he shoved 2 cloud-piercing crossbows into his storage bag, and with a wave of his hand, another 2 crossbows appeared out of nowhere. Another 18 pure steel crossbow bolts were shot out, followed by another 18 bolts, and another 18 bolts. Borrowing the force of the heavy crossbow bolts, Wuxia was sent flying backward for over 100 feet. He had actually fired 12 waves of 24 9-cloud-piercing crossbows in a row. Over 200 crossbow bolts were shot out one after another, and from time to time, miserable cries and curses mixed with anger could be heard coming from the darkness. Lu Qingfeng let out a loud laugh and shouted, "Well done! Ha ha ha!" These 9-cloud-piercing crossbows were seized from the Crocata's cavalry during the battle in Little Meng City. As Wuxia saw the incredible power of these crossbows, he kept 100 of them in his storage bag with the principle of better safe than sorry. Just in time, they would come in handy tonight. The man who shot 3 bolts at Wuxia in the darkness did not expect Wuxia to have a storage bag, and he never expected someone would be so bored as to store so many 9 cloud-piercing crossbows in his storage bag. They were caught unprepared by Wuxia, and more than half of them were killed or wounded on the spot. A gloomy sneer was heard coming from afar. Hee hee, you do have some abilities, but you still have to die. Wuqi's innate energy dissipated, and he staggered and fell to the ground. Lu Qingfeng and the other 2 men quickly came over and met up with Wuqi. Wuqi stretched out his hand and grabbed a few 9 cloud-piercing crossbows from his storage bag, handing them over to them. In the dark, it was much more convenient to use crossbows. Once there was any movement, they just needed to shoot with the crossbow bolts. With Lu Qingfeng in the middle, Wuqi taking the lead, and Luo Kadi and Ma Liang standing on the left and right, the 4 of them were running toward the exit of the alley at their fastest speed. All 4 of them had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm. As they unleashed their innate energy, they could cover a distance of 100 feet with every leap, and they were about to rush out of the alley. However, when the sneer came out, all 4 of them felt the ground beneath their feet suddenly tremble. Not only were the walls of Ji City tall and sturdy, the walls on both sides of the streets in the city also had some tricks up their sleeves. For example, in the alley where Wuqi and his companions were standing, the towering walls on both sides were built with huge rocks, and underneath the foundation of the walls were some kind of mechanism. Once the mechanism was activated, the walls would immediately tilt and collapse toward the middle of the street. If the enemies were to invade the city, no matter how many enemies there were, as long as they were walking on the street, once the mechanism was activated, the huge rocks would collapse, and even an Iron Man would be flattened by the huge rocks. It was unknown what background the culprit behind the attack on Wuqi and his companions had, but he had actually activated the trump card of Great Yan Dynasty, which was supposed to be the last line of defense for the city. All 4 of them felt the ground beneath their feet turn soft, and their speed of flying forward slowed down abruptly. Suddenly, the towering walls on both sides of the 3-mile-long alley tilted inwardly, and the huge rocks several feet in circumference collapsed with a loud rumble. The rocks collided with each other and produced a large amount of sparks. The loud noise broke the tranquility of Ji City. The noise was exactly what Yu Xian and Tai Yuewu heard from the imperial family court. The width of the alley was less than 10 feet, and the walls on both sides were about 70 to 80 feet tall. When the walls tilted inwardly, the top of their heads was immediately sealed off. When the walls disintegrated, huge rocks several feet in circumference came crashing down in a messy manner. The alley had become a dead zone, and there was no place for them to dodge. Luo Kadi and Ma Liang stared at the huge rocks that came crashing down from above. They threw away the bows in their hands, and at the same time, thrust both their fists into the sky with all their strength. Wuqi let out a long and sonorous cry as well. Together, both of them thrust their palms into the sky with all their strength. The several dozens of huge rocks that came crashing down from above suddenly trembled, and the speed of their falling slowed down. With this brief moment of delay, Lu Qingfeng had already taken out 3 array pillars of the Earth Spirit Armor formation. He did not have the time to form an incantation gesture and recite an incantation. Instead, he bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed out a mouthful of blood onto the array pillars, using the fastest and most damaging method to activate the formation. The situation was critical. When Lu Qingfeng bit his tongue, he did not control his strength. His 2 rows of teeth clenched together, and when he sprayed out blood, he even spat out a bean-sized piece of flesh from his tongue. Ouch! Ouch! Blood gushed out like a fountain from Lu Qingfeng's tongue, and he was in so much pain that tears gushed out from his eyes. The 3 array pillars shook, and the ground around them shook. A large amount of dirt yellow airflow came rushing over, quickly forming a dirt yellow energy shield around the 4 of them. Very quickly, Lu Qingfeng threw out the array pillars, which sank deep into the ground and surrounded the 4 of them in a triangular formation. As the huge rocks fell down, the dirt yellow energy shield trembled, and the rocks that came into contact with the shield suddenly broke into pieces, gradually turning into thumb-sized pebbles. Blood gushed out from Lu Qingfeng's mouth, flowing down his chin and dripping onto the clothes on his chest. He pointed his finger at the sky and cursed loudly. Little brats, what kind of hatred do I, Lu Qingfeng, have against you? Why do you have to stab me in the back like this? About 100 feet away, the voice that let out a cold laugh just now suddenly rang out. What? You're not dead yet? The voice was filled with astonishment and doubt, and Wu Qi quickly located the man's position through his voice. Exerting all his strength, Wu Qi pushed away the 2 huge rocks above his head. Then with a 9-cloud-piercing crossbow in his left hand, he sprung up into the air. 9 bolts were shot towards the direction of the man. Wu Qi put away the crossbow and cried out with a stern voice, Luo Kadi, follow me and kill them. Clutching the 2 poisonous thorns he got from Meng Mountains tightly in his hands, Wu Qi leaped forward and covered a distance of over 100 feet, rushing towards the direction of the man. Luo Kadi, who was infuriated by the ambush, pulled out his long sword, cursed and charged towards the man. Chapter 66. 300 feet away, standing on top of a wall, was a handsome young man wearing a silver robe and a white cloak. Beside him stood a dozen or so men in black, all of them looking at him as if they had seen a ghost. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that the collapse of the huge stone wall would not crush Wu Qi and his companions. Wu Qi's movements were so fast that when he pushed away the huge stone wall and came out from under it, these people were all stunned for a moment. During this time, 9 crossbow bolts whistled through the air. The silver-robed young man let out a strange cry. His body tilted, and he tumbled down from the top of the wall. Even though he had escaped quickly, one of the bolts still pierced through his shoulder, creating a hole in his body. The silver-robed young man howled in pain. When he fell to the ground, he lost his balance, and his right leg slanted to the ground. A crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. His ankle was also broken. 5 of the other dozen or so men in black were injured by the crossbow bolts. The 9-cloud-piercing crossbow was extremely powerful. Within a short distance of 300 feet, those who were hit would be pierced through, leaving behind a hole the size of a child's fist. Blood spurted out. Although those who were hit were not in vital areas, they were still in so much pain that they felt powerless. The silver-robed young man's screams were still echoing in the night sky. In just 2 leaps, Wu Qi had arrived in front of him, and without hesitation, the prickle in his right hand pierced towards his throat. Wu Qi's eyes were as cold as ice, revealing a killing intent that made people despair. He shouted in a low voice, "If I don't die, you will die." The silver-robed young man raised his head in horror. He was about to scream, but just happened to see Wu Qi's cold, emotionless eyes that did not seem human. His breath stagnated, and the scream that had reached his throat stopped abruptly. Instinctively, he pushed his hands against the ground, rolling and crawling backwards. But behind him was a wall, and after running for 2 steps, he bumped into the wall. The pitch-black prickle carried a faint fishy smell, and was about to pierce into the silver-robed young man's body at lightning speed. From the corner of the street, a gentle voice of a woman suddenly rang out. "Stop!" Wu Qi didn't care about the woman's screams. He stared at the silver-robed youth, and the prickle pierced deeply into his throat. The silver-robed young man stared at Wu Qi in disbelief. His body twitched, and in the blink of an eye, dark blood spurted out from his 7 apertures and pores. His body quickly shrunk into a piece of black meat the size of a child. The man in black on top of the wall let out a heart-wrenching cry of despair. "Young master!" A few black-clothed men leaped down from the top of the wall. The weapons in their hands carried a foot-long aura of energy as they hacked down viciously at Wu Qi's head. With a disdainful snort, Wu Qi lightly tapped the ground with his toes, and quickly rushed toward the direction of the woman's voice. Like a mad tiger, Luo Kadi roared and charged towards Ji Hao. He swung his sword, and a 6 feet long, pale red sword beam flashed across the air. A few black-clothed men were still in midair when the sword beam slashed across their waists. Blood spurted out, and a dozen or so bloody bodies fell heavily to the ground. These black-clothed men were not dead yet, and the upper half of their bodies twitched on the ground, constantly letting out extremely mournful cries. Luo Kadi swung his sword, venting all the anger and resentment of being captured and forced by Wu Qi to join Lu Qingfeng's side. He raised his bloody sword and said with a smile, Useless chickens and stray dogs, unable to withstand even a single blow. How dare you, a bunch of lowly dogs, have any intention of touching our young master? The night wind whistled in his ears. Wuxia stared at the corner of the street a few hundred feet away. A luxurious carriage with gold as the shaft, pure silver as the wheels, and dark green gauze was stopped at the corner of the street. A dozen strong men wearing green cloaks were standing guard around the carriage. They stared coldly at Wuxia, who was rushing towards them. The woman's voice just now came from this carriage. No matter who the woman in the carriage was, she must be in cahoots with that silver-robed youth. Ambushing in the middle of the night, knowing the silver-robed youth who was obviously the mastermind, and watching from the corner of the street, it was obvious that this woman was not Wuxia's friend. Right after he arrived at G City, he was lured out by someone and forced to engage in a fierce battle. They even had to use the city's defensive mechanisms and heavy ballistae. This made Wuxia's heart burn with anger. No matter who the enemy was, he just had to kill them. As long as Lu Qingfeng inherited Yan Buji's title and official position, who in Great Yan Dynasty would be someone he couldn't afford to offend. The blue gleam in Wuxia's eyes condensed, and a deep yet unceasing voice came out from his mouth like the roar of a great tide in the middle of the night. He lowered his body, hid 2 prickles behind his back, and strode towards the carriage. 4 green cloaks were thrown into the sky. 4 green-clothed men pulled out their swords and strode towards Wuxia. One of them roared, "How dare you? Step back, or else we'll kill you." Before his words could fade away, Wuxia exerted his strength with his feet, crushing a few of the stones on the street. Borrowing the force, he sprinted forward, and in just a blink of an eye, he had arrived next to the 4 men. He thrust both of his palms forward, and the prickles pierced through the air and arrived in front of the 4 young men. The swords were as white as snow, and the wind created by the swords was fierce and loud. 4 sword beams transformed into 4 bright ribbons and thrust forward, accurately hitting the prickles. Wuxia let out a strange laugh, and infused his innate water energy into the prickles. When the swords touched the prickles, they were pushed aside by the whirlpool of airflow. The prickles gently thrust out and pierced into the bodies of the 4 young men. Although the prickles had only pierced 3 inches into their bodies, the 4 young men began to convulse violently. Their bodies quickly twisted and shrunk, and in just a blink of an eye, they had turned into pitch-black meatballs. Dirty blood flowed and stained the ground. "How dare you?" The young men near the carriage were shocked and angered at the same time. 6 green cloaks were thrown out, and 6 young men pulled out their single-edged broadswords, rushing towards Wuxia with small steps. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and the 6 broadswords brought up streams of light, like shooting stars shooting down from the sky, hacking towards Wuxia's body. Wuxia, who was rushing forward, stopped abruptly. He laughed out loud and tucked the prickles under his armpits, and suddenly, 2 9-cloud-piercing crossbows appeared in his hands. Along with a series of cracking sounds, 18 pure steel bolts shot out. The young men in green who were rushing towards Wuxia were less than 30 feet away from Wuxia. They couldn't dodge in time, and were hit by the bolts. At such a close distance, the tremendous kinetic energy attached to the bolts sent their bodies flying for 30 to 40 feet away. Tens of blood spurted out from their mouths, and left a 100-feet-long trail of blood on the ground. Beside the carriage, besides the man in black who was driving the carriage, there were only 6 young men in green. Wuxia sneered and continued dashing towards the carriage. He fixed his eyes on the window of the carriage. Behind the green gauze, someone was looking at Wuxia through the thin bamboo curtain, his eyes filled with surprise and anger. Instinctively, Wuxia hated this man's gaze. Most of his divine sense was focused on this man, and the 2 prickles were faintly vibrating along with his arms. Once he got close to the carriage, the tips of the prickles would meet the man's heart. "How dare you?" The woman's soft voice rang out again. The young man in green who was standing beside the carriage was about to rush out, but the woman sneered and said, "Stop, you are no match for him." A dark shadow silently darted out of the carriage, and floated about a foot above the ground, pouncing towards Wuxia like a ghost. As soon as the dark shadow appeared, small whirlwinds rose from the surrounding streets. Tens of bull-thick whirlwinds, and a few feet tall, spun along with the dark shadow. A layer of hazy black mist gushed out from the ground and gradually gathered towards the dark shadow. With a flick of his finger, 2 prickles darted out along with an ear-piercing whistling sound and hit the dark shadow. The prickles pierced through the dark shadow's body and flew far away. The dark shadow didn't show any reaction and was still floating about a foot above the ground, pouncing towards Wuxia at a moderate speed. Wuxia was taken aback. He fixed his eyes on the dark shadow and saw a beautiful lady with a slightly green face amidst the dark mist. She was baring her teeth and grinning at him. It was a very frightening smile. The woman's eyes were faintly glowing with a blood-red light. When her eyes met Wuxia's, Wuxia felt chills running down his spine. Gusts of cold wind kept spreading out from the woman's body, rolling up whirlwinds and black mist, accompanied by a deep laughter that seemed to resound directly in his mind. The strange woman dashed in front of Wuxia, grabbing his neck with both hands. Wuxia felt a chill coming from his back. In the middle of the night, under the dim moonlight, a translucent woman was grabbing his neck. He couldn't help but cry out, "Damn it, what are you?" Spreading his hands apart, the innate water energy gathered in his palms, and with all his strength, Wuxia thrust his palms towards the woman's claws. The woman's soft laughter came from the carriage. "Damn it! Didn't you see a ghost today?" Soundlessly, his palms collided with the woman's claws. Wuxia felt a gust of cold air rushing up from his palms, and couldn't help but shiver. In a blink of an eye, his fingertips turned black, and his fingers went numb, losing all feeling. The woman's smile froze. The innate water energy was extremely mysterious. It was cultivated by Wuxia with the help of a thread of innate water energy found in the innate water stone. When the energy rushed into the woman's body, it immediately messed up the flow of energy in her body, and at the same time, a gust of cold air rushed through her body. A chilly wind blew in all directions, and the woman's body suddenly became much dimmer, turning from translucent to almost completely transparent. A shrill scream came from the woman's mouth. She turned around, transformed into a gust of chilly wind, and dashed towards the carriage. From within the carriage came the gentle voice of a woman. "How dare you? You even dared to injure my demonic ghost guards. Are you seeking death?" A beam of red light came from behind and hit the chilly wind. A loud boom rang out, and a ball of red flame exploded, shattering the chilly wind. Vaguely, a hazy head of a woman could be seen jumping into the carriage and disappearing. Wuxia quickly turned around. It was Luo Kadi who shot out an explosive talisman and shattered the chilly wind transformed from the demonic ghost. Reluctantly, Wuxia took a glance at the carriage. His arms were stiff, and his body was shivering. He clenched his teeth and shouted in a low voice, "Retreat! Leave this place as soon as possible." Chapter 67. A bed crossbow used by the City Defense Army, and several dozen special crossbow machines capable of firing the 3-edged wind-piercing bone-piercing awls, a secret weapon made by the Mahis sect, were found by the soldiers who had just arrived at the base of the wall nearby. Lying next to these weapons were several dozens of dead bodies. Some of them were severely poisoned, and their bodies had shrunk to the size of a toddler. Laughing strangely, Wuxia exerted his innate water energy with all his strength. A large sheet of misty water vapor rose from them, wrapping them up and bringing them back to the direction of the city wall. Wuxia glared at Lu Chengfeng, then said with a cold voice, "I won't leave you behind until I'm at the end of my rope. If that happens, I'll definitely leave this place at the fastest speed and avenge you. Now we should still have a chance. Let me think. The soldiers brought by the man in black were not any better. The power of the powder concocted by Wuxia was comparable to the enhanced tear gas. Hundreds of soldiers were howling and wailing, sneezing and coughing. They were in a complete mess. Their eyes were burning with a severe pain, and tears were rolling down their faces uncontrollably. Their eyes were all red, and how could they still pursue those involved in the case? Those who lived in the inner city were all the nobles and princes of Great Yin dynasty. These captains were afraid that someone would intrude into these courtyards and alert the nobles. As they were on duty tonight, this was not something they could afford. Using chili powder, they took down the dogs that were tracking them, and using water vapor to block the eyes of those sky-patrolling eagle guards, as well as the fact that all of them had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, Wuxia and his company came to the city wall without any trouble. Lu Chengfeng wiped off the rainwater from his face and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid we won't be able to leave this place." Looking at Lu Chengfeng, Wuxia shook his head helplessly and said, "I'll try my best." Since he was going to use this trick, why did he still try so hard to escape just now? From his nose to his lungs, a ball of raging flame was burning fiercely. The man in black rolled and struggled for a while, then fainted from the impact. Mixed with the aura of innate water gang, the water vapor also carried a bit of mystery. High up in the sky, a few sky-patrolling eagle guards of scouting office widened their eyes. They kept activating the innate ability of the spirit bird soul essence, but no matter how hard they tried, they could not see through the water vapor that Wuxia had rolled up. Abruptly, the man in black let out a miserable howl. The thin yellow dog shadow behind him raised its head towards the sky and let out a few soundless howls. After twitching for a few times, it quickly shrank back into the body of the man in black. The man in black robe howled out, covering his nose with his hand and rolling on the ground. A faintly discernible barking sound came from afar. A few black-clothed men, whose bodies were wrapped in a faint yellow light and had a strangely shaped shadow of a dog floating behind them, rushed to the scene of the crime as fast as lightning. They sniffed the air carefully and sniffed the scent left behind in the surroundings. Then they quickly led the large group of soldiers down the street. Under the eyes of these men, which were emitting a strange gleam, although it was a pitch-black night, although it was a stormy day, they could still clearly see even a grain of sand on the street. In those luxurious mansions, even the sentries and guards hiding under the bushes could not escape from their divine eyes, which could penetrate 10 feet deep into the ground. Lu Chengfeng was frightened by Wu Qi's loud shout, and his body trembled. He rolled his eyes and glared at Wu Qi. Vaguely, he saw a man in black robe coming from behind, sniffing his nose and bringing a large group of soldiers with him. Not far away from him, a couple of men with shadows of wind-breaking wolves behind their backs were seen flying at top speed. Suddenly, a few huge blue shadows shot up into the sky from a corner of G City. They were a few vague shadows of strange birds with a wingspan of over 50 feet. Within the belly of these strange birds, a few men of scouting office, clad in black soft armors, were shooting out a 1-foot-long blue gleam from their eyes, scanning the area underneath them in a strict manner. The thin yellow dog was a famous dog in this world, the 100-mile sniffing dog, who was born with a very developed sense of smell. After fusing with the soul of the thin dog, this man in black had a very developed sense of smell, and his nose had become very sensitive and fragile. Wu Qi took out a powder mixed with dozens of spicy spices, especially 3 of the strongest wild pepper, and threw it out. The man in black bore the brunt of the powder and took a deep breath. With a strange smile on his face, Wu Qi took out a couple dozens of local spices from his storage bag, which he had collected in Little Meng City. Among them, there was a kind of chili that could make one spit fire, and star anise cinnamon that could make one faint. The natural energy in this world was many times denser than the earth, and the efficacy of all kinds of spices produced here was also many times stronger. Using lethal weapons in G City, and even activating the city defense mechanism in an alleyway, no doubt, this was a big case. No matter who was the mastermind behind this case, someone would have to face the consequences. Muffled sounds of footsteps were heard coming from everywhere. The boots issued to the City Defense Army of G City were made from cow tendons, with steel wires coiled on the inside and steel sheets on the outside. When these boots collided with the stone pavement on the street, the loud noises produced were deafening. The shrill whistle spread far and wide, and the dozens of arrow towers and sentry posts on the city walls of G City began to light up. It was unknown what kind of equipment was used, but from the arrow towers and sentry posts, beams of 2 feet thick yellow light that could reach a distance of a few miles were shot out. Like sharp blades, they tore apart the curtain of night and swept across the area underneath. When the barking from behind was less than 200 feet away, Wu Qi sneered and casually threw the handful of powder up into the sky. The powerful innate water energy mixed with the powder had unleashed a miraculous effect. Wherever the powder passed, all the raindrops avoided it. The storm could do nothing to the powder, and the strong wind blew the powder away along the street. Suddenly, Wuxia sprung to his feet, mustered all his innate energy and cried out, "I'm the best friend of Sir Yen Bugue, scouting officer. We were robbed in Ji City and killed for our money. Help me, help me. Yen Bugue, if you don't come out and save us, I'll fuck all 18 generations of your ancestors." A thunderclap came from the sky. Dark clouds covered the bright moon, and the storm came without warning. The strong wind blew the raindrops, lashing the streets and alleyways of Ji City like countless whips. Water vapor rose up into the air, and no one could be seen 3 steps away from them. Hiding in a dark corner with the help of the water vapor, Wuxia looked at the brightly lit city gate that led to the outer layer of the city. However, if he wanted to return to Lu Qingfeng's mansion, there were still 2 layers of city walls along the way. At the moment, not only were the city walls densely guarded by soldiers, they were also embedded with a great number of warning formations. If Wuxia was alone, he would still have the confidence to escape by relying on the escaping and concealing technique he learned from Scroll of Stealing. However, if he had to bring Lu Qingfeng and the others with him, he had no confidence at all. Looking at the shadowy blue bird that was flying high above his head, the wind-breaking wolves that were flying across the buildings in the distance, and the barking that came from behind him, Wuxia breathed out a deep sigh. So this was the imperial city of Great Yen Dynasty. With such a tight defense, how could anyone survive? First, over 10,000 soldiers had completely sealed off the few streets in the vicinity. After that, all the capable men from related government offices in Ji City had arrived. Not long after that, a shrill howl of a wolf was heard coming from the sky. Over 200 men of scouting officer, who were shrouded in a green glow and had the shadowy figure of a wind-breaking wolf looming behind their backs, leaped out from all directions. With the crime scene as the center, they quickly searched the surroundings. Thunderbolts were rolling and rocking above their heads. Electric arcs that looked like silver snakes kept piercing down from the dark clouds. Currently, they could still hide under the cover of the water vapor, but when more and more soldiers arrived, and when they began to comb through the entire area, they would no longer be able to hide any longer. Lu Qingfeng was lured and killed right after he arrived at Ji City. No one could tell who was a friend and who was a foe. Perhaps when they were discovered, the second wave of assassins from the enemy would arrive right after. Footsteps like this could be heard coming from all directions. A large number of soldiers had taken control of the few streets in the vicinity, sealing off all the entrances and exits. The front doors of a few mansions in the vicinity were knocked on loudly. Captains who led their soldiers to the scene kept shouting and informing the people in those mansions about what happened outside, requesting the owners of those mansions to send out their personal guards and search through their own mansions, preventing any intruders. Taking advantage of the strong wind and heavy rain, Wuxia and his company were nearly caught by a beam of light. If not because Wuxia suddenly sensed danger and grabbed hold of Lu Qingfeng, who was sprinting forward, their whereabouts would have been exposed. Wuxia gnashed his teeth and said, "We have to leave even if we can't. Before you become Zhuguozheng, you can't fall into their hands. Or else, you won't even know how you died." Quickly glancing around, Wuxia said with a ferocious voice, "Rest assured, young master. You're the first friend Wuxia has after leaving the mountain. If you die in Ji City, I'll definitely avenge you. I swear I'll wipe out the entire clan of those who harmed you." He reached out his hand and crushed all the spices, especially the large handful of chili peppers. Then he unleashed his innate water energy through his body, controlling the water vapor in the surroundings, and making it spin slowly around Wuxia and his company. The innate water energy could control all the water element energy under the heaven. In an instant, the area of 10 feet around Wuxia and his company was completely emptied. With great effort he kneaded the spices, and in just a short period of time, he had produced 7 to 8 kilograms of mixed powder. Even though the weather was extremely bad, it seemed like these men in black could still capture some insignificant aura amidst the wind and rain. Clearing his throat, Lu Qingfeng looked at Wuxia with a slightly bleak expression and said, "Wuxia, if you have the confidence, just run back alone. I'll take the risk. Those who want to kill me can't really bribe all the city guards of Ji City. Can they? If I don't die, that will be the best." But if I do die, just avenge me. Lu Chengfeng gazed at Wu Qi with a hidden bitterness, sighed and said, "Thank you for avenging me. But can you give me some good news? For example, can you bring me back safely?" The barking from behind was getting closer and closer. The aura of Wu Qi and his company had been captured by those men in black. Wu Qi sneered and said, "It seems like these beast warriors are able to borrow the soul essence of wild beasts and unleash their innate ability to the maximum. What is the weakness of a dog?" Once again, he couldn't help but feel a ball of anger rising in his heart. With such a tight defense, they could still play an ambush. If not for the fact that all four of them were Xiantian experts who had concealed their aura of Xiantian realm using aura-concealing talismans, they would have been killed by those men when they were caught unprepared. How could the public security of G City be so bad? At this moment, a heavy rain was falling from the sky, and the power of innate water energy had increased by 3 times in this heavy rain. Wu Qi's voice was louder than the rumbling of thunder, rolling and spreading over 20 miles away. Chapter 68. Immediately, a group of dozens of scouting officers who were passing by them leaped towards them, accompanied by a faint howl of a wolf. A wild wind filled with wood elemental energies came blowing towards them. A man, clad in a black soft armor and carrying a sharp sword on his back, dressed in the same manner as Yen Bugui, had surrounded Wu Qi and his companions. Wu Qi's voice was a little too loud, and the commotion caused by him was a little too loud. From afar, beams of blue light were seen shooting up into the sky. Nearly 100 sky patrolling eagle guards were flying towards them at top speed, accompanied by ear-splitting bird cries. The howl of the wolf could be heard coming from both near and far. It was as if the entire G-City had turned into a den of wild wolves. The howl of the wolf could be heard coming from everywhere, and one green figure after another was seen sprinting towards Wu Qi and his companions. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, nearly 100 sky patrolling eagle guards had gathered in the sky and were wheeling at top speed. The shadows of strange blue birds were stirring up a strong wind, causing the raindrops to shoot down like bullets. Over 300 scouting officers, who had fused with the soul of wind-breaking wolf, had arrived at the scene as well. The surrounding walls were fully occupied by the men of scouting officers. Following that, a dozen of rough lion roars came from afar. Dozens of burly men, clad in heavy armor, their bodies shrouded in blazing flames, and having the soul of a flaming lion behind their backs, each having a height of 40 to 80 feet tall, arrived with a large group of soldiers. Everyone had their eyes fixed on Wu Qi with a strange look in their eyes. Among the last group of burly men, the one with the soul of a flaming lion behind his back was an 80 feet tall, emitting a rolling heat current. When the raindrops came close to him, they would turn into water vapor and disperse. The burly man, whose body was shrouded in a thick layer of white water vapor, strode forward. Relying on the fact that he was 1.5 feet taller than Wu Qi, he looked down at Wu Qi from above, sizing him up for a while. Yen Bugui's best friend? Hee, fuck his best friend from 18 generations ago? Yen Bugui is such a lucky guy. Wu Qi twitched his lips and let out a dry laugh. The aura emitted from this burly man was way too frightening. It was strong, majestic, and extremely violent. This was a true embryonic breath-level expert, unlike Old Devil and Lord Flame who used evil methods to break through. He was a true expert who had built a solid foundation step by step and broke through step by step. With a hollow laugh, Wu Qi cupped his hands towards the man who looked to be in his 30s and said, "May I know the general's name?" The man chuckled, slapped heavily on Wu Qi's shoulder and said, "My surname is Ji, and my surname is Yen, Yen as in Yen Bugui. My name is Yen Jiuhui, the chief supervisor of West Wind Guard of Great Yen Dynasty's scouting office, and I am Yen Bugui's grandfather. Didn't you just say that you wanted to fuck his 18 generations of ancestors?" The scouting office of Great Yen Dynasty was divided into 5 major wind guards: North, South, East, West, and Central. They were responsible for all the affairs of the vassal kingdoms in the 4 directions of Great Yen Dynasty, as well as the Great Yen Dynasty itself. The chief supervisor was the highest executive officer of a wind guard. He had the right to act first and report later. In fact, most of the time, even if he acted first without reporting, no one would investigate the details. Cold sweat broke out from Lu Qingfeng's forehead. The West Wind Guard of Scouting Office was responsible for monitoring all vassal kingdoms in the west of Great Yin Dynasty. The Lu Kingdom was one of those vassal kingdoms in the west of Great Yin Dynasty. From a certain point of view, the West Wind Guard was a sharp blade that hung above the head of many influential clans in Lu Kingdom. Although Great Yin Dynasty never meddled in the internal affairs of vassal kingdoms, but if the chief supervisor of West Wind Guard really wanted to meddle in the affairs of Lu Kingdom, who would dare to say no? Who would dare to say no? If Yan Jiuhui said he wanted to punish the Lu Kingdom, there would be many people who would jump up and smash the Lu Kingdom's head. Letting out a dry cough, Lu Qingfeng took 2 steps forward, bowed to Yan Jiuhui and said, "Chief Supervisor, I Qingfeng, offer my greetings." Yan Jiuhui let out a few laughs, waved his hand at Lu Qingfeng, laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. So many people have heard what this little fellow said just now. I Yan Jiuhui, am a man with a strong foundation and reputation in Ji City. Now that I'm insulted by this little fellow, how am I going to face anyone in the future?" He fiercely glared at Wu Qi-Yan, who acted as if nothing had happened. Then Yan Jiuhui smacked his lips, stared at Lu Qingfeng, sneered and said, "Who are you? What is going on tonight?" A 3 miles long section of the mountain collapsing wall has collapsed. Who has such a deep blood feud with you and wants to kill you? Stretching out his hand, Yan Jiuhui grabbed towards Lu Qingfeng's neck. He let out a loud laugh and said, Why am I wasting my time talking with you little kids? I'll capture them and interrogate them. What do you think I don't know? Boys, I've captured them. Prepare your weapons and let them have a good time." Wu Qi came before Lu Qingfeng, stretched out his hand and thrust his palm towards Yan Jiuhui's wrist. With an indifferent tone, Wu Qi said, "Why are you so angry, Chief Supervisor? I was forced to be rude. If I didn't shout at you, I'm afraid all of you will lose your lives." Looking at how Wu Qi dared to attack him, a fiery gleam flickered in Yan Jiuhui's eyes. Suddenly, he burst out into a loud laughter. He retracted his palm and changed it into a fist, thrusting it towards Wu Qi's palm. He laughed and said, "Good. Come. If you can defeat me, I'll take care of everything that happened tonight for you." As the fist and the palm collided, Wu Qi felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him. The tremendous force made him lose his balance. With a muffled groan, he was forced to take a few steps back. The scorching hot fist force blasted into the meridians of Wu Qi's arm. However, it just so happened that it was neutralized by the cold aura that invaded his meridians from the demonic ghost. Water and fire were mutually restraining each other. The cold aura and hot aura quickly neutralized each other. The internal energy in Wu Qi's meridians fluctuated. His arm, which was a little stiff a moment ago, immediately returned to normal. However, Yan Jiuhui's body shook. When his fist landed on the center of Wu Qi's palm, even though he managed to repel Wu Qi, his body was twisted by the peculiar whirlpool-like energy in the center of Wu Qi's palm. As a result, 80% of the fist force missed its target. His body trembled. The fist force that he had blasted into the air pulled his body backward, staggering for a dozen steps. After that, he punched the wall on the side of the road, creating a big hole. "Good fist force," Wu Qi cried out. "Good fist force." Yan Jiuhui retracted his fist with astonishment. He fiercely gazed at Wu Qi from top to bottom and said, "At such a young age, you have already reached the realm of Xiantian. That young man just now called himself Qingfeng? Could he be Lu Qingfeng? Little fellow, don't tell me you are his hanger-on, Wu Qi?" Lu Qingfeng was overjoyed. He quickly answered, "Chief Supervisor, have you heard of the name Qingfeng?" "Pooh." Yan Jiuhui spat on the ground, slapped on his forehead forcefully and cried out, "That bastard Yan Bugui had mentioned you before. What are you doing in Ji City instead of waiting for the reward in the Lu Kingdom?" A light howl of a wolf was heard. Bringing together a few men, Yan Bugui came rushing towards them from a far distance. A green shadow flashed past, as Yan Bugui leaped and landed on the street. He gave Wuxia a look and said happily, "So it is you. Wuxi, your mouth is really hard to enjoy." Shaking his head, Yan Bugui turned to Yan Jiuhui and reported, "Chief Supervisor, Lu Qingfeng might be the descendant of Duke Yan Lu. The reason he came here this time should be because he was going to the imperial family court to confirm his bloodline, so that he could enter the family register and inherit the title of Duke Yan Lu and the position of West Supervisor." Yan Bugui smiled at Lu Qingfeng, then said with a deep voice, "I've just received the news that the imperial family court, Duke Yuxian, is coming here with Mistress Riyang." Upon hearing Yan Bugui's words, Yan Jiuhui's expression turned extremely strange. He gave Lu Qingfeng a glance from head to toe for a while, then suddenly turned to look at Wu Qi and sneered. 18 generations of ancestors? 18 generations of ancestors. Yan Jiuhui sneered for no reason, then cried out with a deep voice, "Why did you only know about this news now? Someone has mobilized the military bed crossbows in Ji City, and even used the wind-breaking bone-piercing awl, which is specially used to target Xiantian warriors. Why didn't the imperial family court report about this? They even used the mountain-crushing wall, just to kill Lu. Young Master Lu, who is so bold to do that?" Yan Bugui bowed at Yan Jiuhui, smiled bitterly and said, "The bed crossbows were mobilized from the 4th Battalion of Yellow City Defense Army. Who is the one behind this? The thread has been cut off. The treasurer who was in charge of the ordnance of the 4th Battalion had just died in the bed of his concubine, and the news about Mistress Riyang paying a secret visit to Duke Yuxian has been blocked by someone. I just received this news just now." The faces of Wu Qi, Lu Qingfeng, and Yan Jiuhui changed instantly. Wu Qi gave Lu Qingfeng a look, while Lu Qingfeng shook his head with a gloomy face. On the other side, Yan Jiuhui sneered and said, "Very well. Someone even dares to tamper with the information in the imperial family court. Who is it?" Yan Bugui coughed lightly, then spat out a name. Qing Shui. Yan Jiuhui's face turned even uglier. He stamped his feet, sneered and said, "He is really unscrupulous. Does he really think that no one can control him?" Before his words could fade away, someone had already answered with a shrill voice. "Yan Jiuhui, don't tell me that the unscrupulous man you mentioned is me?" A series of rapid footsteps was heard. A middle-aged man, who had a face like a donkey, and was only 2/3 the width of a normal person, and looked as skinny as a cleaver, was swaggering towards them. Amidst the raging storm, this man was clad in a very loose white robe. The robe was fluttering in the wind, as if it could bring his skinny and scrawny body up into the sky. This man was Qing Shui, the chief supervisor of the Central Wind Guard of Great Yin Dynasty's scouting office. He was in charge of all the scouting office in all the territories directly under the jurisdiction of Great Yin Dynasty. At the same time, he had a certain degree of supervision over the East, South, West, and North Wind Guards of scouting office. Qing Shui's white robe was flapping noisily, due to the strong wind. Arrogantly, he pointed his finger at Lu Qingfeng, sneered and said, "This man is suspected of murdering the hostage of Xian Kingdom, Taba Qingya. Somebody, bring him and all his accomplices back and interrogate them. Find out how they got their hands on the bed crossbows and bone-breaking awls from the army. We have to find out who is the one who colluded with him, giving him the courage to commit a crime in Ji City." Lu Qingfeng stared at Qing Shui with great surprise. With a stern voice he said, "Your Excellency, it was me who was ambushed and killed." Qing Shui rolled his eyes, shook his head and sneered. "What a joke! Do you think I'm blind? Obviously, it was you who colluded with the scum of the army, setting up an ambush to assassinate the hostage of Xian Kingdom. Somebody capture this fellow and all his accomplices." Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown. This Qing Shui was here for Lu Qingfeng. On the other side, Lu Qingfeng had his eyes fixed on Qing Shui. He had no idea why this man was targeting him. Yan Jiuhui's eyes went wide, then he cried out with a deep voice, Qing Shui, things are not like what you said." He stretched out his hand and stopped the large group of men behind Qing Shui. Qing Shui tilted his head up and stared at the dark clouds and lightning bolts in the sky. With an indifferent voice he said, "Yan Jiuhui, Don't you forget that this is G City, and I'm the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office. Whatever is happening here is not under your jurisdiction, so you can't interfere with it. Slapping Yan Jiuhui's arm away with his palm, Qin Qingshui cried out sternly, "Somebody, take him away and throw him into the prison of Scouting Office." A group of beast warriors immediately leaped forward like wolves and tigers. Chapter 69. Lu Chengfeng just let 2 beast warriors of Scouting Office grab his hands. Among the beast warriors brought here by Qin Qingshui, more than half of them had the soul of a flying bear with a single horn and a pair of wings behind their back, and a strange-looking wild boar, which had 4 tusks protruding from its mouth, and was covered in needle-like hair, treading on flaming clouds. The strength of these flying bear beast warriors was incredible. As soon as Lu Chengfeng's arms were grabbed by them, he felt his entire body go numb, and could no longer move. The same went for Luo Kedi and Ma Liang. In front of the 2 chief supervisors of Scouting Office, they had no courage to resist. Just like Lu Chengfeng, they had a deep reverence for everything in Great Yin Dynasty. Therefore, when Qin Qingshui ordered his men to capture them, how could they dare to resist? Only Wu Qi took a step back casually. The tip of his foot brushed across the puddles on the ground, stirring up a stream of water vapor, and avoiding the clutches of 2 beast warriors. He stared at Qin Qingshui with a faint smile on his face. He had prepared himself to kill Qin Qingshui with all his might, and if he failed, he would immediately activate the escape art of innate water element and flee. Never place your safety in the hands of others. This was the biggest advice Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai had given to Wu Qi. Lu Chengfeng, Luo Kedi, and Ma Liang did not dare to resist, but Wu Qi dared. Not only did he dare to resist, he even dared to try and kill Qin Qingshui with all his might before he fled. Seeing Wu Qi take a step back and avoid the clutches of his own subordinates, Qin Qingshui bellowed furiously, "How dare you?" Wu Qi just smiled faintly, narrowing his eyes as he stared at Qin Qingshui. He had his back against a wall, carefully keeping a certain distance from the men of Scouting Office. A large sheet of water vapor was hovering and twirling around him, making his body look hazy and blurry. The onlookers suddenly had an illusion that Wu Qi could vanish from the water vapor at any time. A deep, muffled roar of a boar rang out. Behind Qin Qingshui, a beast warrior with a beast soul of a red wild boar on his back suddenly lowered his head, turned his body into a violent storm, and slammed toward Wu Qi with a deep, muffled whistle. The man lowered his head and slammed at an incredible speed, forcibly breaking through the rainstorm and creating a white curtain of water. His body was covered by a rolling energy, knocking away countless raindrops and shooting in all directions like bullets. Wu Qi grinned and took a step to the side. Then he reached out his hand and grabbed the man's neck, pressing his entire body against the wall behind him. With a loud bang, the ground shook, and the crisp sound of dozens of bones breaking could be heard. This person's entire body sank into the thick wall. Blood slowly seeped out from the broken wall, and soon, the puddles on the ground were dyed red. He knew Wu Qi was a bold man, but he never thought that Wu Qi would be so bold as to kill Qin Qingshui's subordinate right in front of him. He knew that Wu Qi was a brave man, but never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Wu Qi would be so bold as to kill his subordinate right in front of Qin Qingshui. He was a man of Scouting Office, and a man who served right beside the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard. Luo Kedi and Ma Liang were struck dumb. Was there really someone who was not afraid of death? Was there really someone who dared to provoke Scouting Office in the imperial city of Great Yin Dynasty? This was no longer a question of whether he had the guts or not. He was simply a simpleton. Even when the monarch of the Lu Kingdom came to Ji City, he still had to bow and say good things about him. As for Wu Qi, he was just a hanger-on of Lu Chengfeng. Although he was the so-called chief hanger-on, wasn't he still a hanger-on? Meanwhile, Yan Jiuhui and Yan Bugui took a deep breath at the same time, then exhaled comfortably. Yan Bugui gave Wu Qi a deep look and secretly gave him a thumbs up. On the other side, Yan Jiuhui was clapping his hands openly, laughing out loud and saying, "Good lad. You have guts, you do have guts." For so many years, It has been a long time since a young man dared to act like you. Qin Qingshui, this little boy, I want him. Qin Qingshui was so angry that his body was trembling. He glared at Yan Jiuhui furiously and cried out in a hoarse voice. How presumptuous! How dare you? How dare you kill a man of scouting office? You, where are you from? Where do you live? Somebody, find out who his 9 clan members are, search his house, wipe out his entire clan, and wipe out his sect. Qin Qingshui was so angry that his hair was standing straight up. He clenched his fists tightly, and a cold gleam was shooting out from his eyes. Suddenly, a dark green mist sprayed out from his back. Amidst the mist that was rolling and rolling like water, a 3-headed giant serpent with a bronze body and countless green, red, and blue spots slowly raised its head up. 18 large eyes were fixed on the 3 heads of the serpent, staring straight at Wuxia. Taking a glance at the 3-headed giant serpent behind Qin Qingshui, Wuxia sneered and said, So it is a lower-tier spirit beast, the dark nether python. Chief Supervisor Qin, you are being unreasonable. This subordinate of yours committed suicide by ramming his head into a wall. What does that have to do with me? Committed suicide by ramming his head into a wall? Qin Qingshui was so angry that his eyeballs nearly popped out from his eye sockets. Yan Jiuhui suddenly burst into a loud laughter. He laughed so hard that his body rocked back and forth, and nearly fell to the ground. Patting his belly, he burst out laughing and said, That's right, I can testify for you. Even if I have to face the chief general, I'll still say the same thing. This damned kid committed suicide by ramming his head into a wall. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Upon hearing Yan Jiuhui's joke, Qin Qingshui let out a strange cry. He spun his body, and the white robe he wore began to sway like a whirlwind, while countless raindrops began to spin around his body at a high speed. The dark nether python behind his back opened its mouth wide and thrust forward. Qin Qingshui's body froze in midair, then shot towards Wuxia at lightning speed. The index finger of his right hand was like the tongue of a poisonous python, thrusting straight towards the center of Wuxia's brows. Amidst a sizzling noise, a 3-feet-long finger beam darted out from Qin Qingshui's fingertip, bringing along a cold breeze as it shot straight towards Wuxia. Wuxia's face turned cold. The inexhaustible energy in his arms surged like tidewater, producing a strong and violent sound of waves slapping against the shore. The energy whirlpool in the center of his palm was spinning at an incredible speed. The endless water element energies in the heavy rain kept fusing into Wuxia's palms, gathering in the center of his palms. He had accumulated the strongest force in his current stage, waiting to kill Qin Qingshui, then escape with the help of the water element. He had prepared to take out the innate water serpent pill from the storage bag. Once Qin Qingshui was killed, he would take out the pill and use the enormous energy contained within to cast the escape art. With his current cultivation, he could at most run 3 to 5 miles away with the escape art. However, with the help of the innate water serpent pill, he could at least run 500 miles away in one breath. Staring fixedly at the approaching finger of Qin Qingshui, Wuxia slightly raised both of his palms, getting ready to kill him with all his strength. The Jade Breaking Palm, a secret skill learned in Scroll of Stealing, was ready to be unleashed. The innate water energy was rolling and rocking in a few specific meridians in his palms, stacking and strengthening, gradually forming into an explosive force. Right at this moment, a coach suddenly came speeding towards them. A vigorous and forceful voice was heard. Marquis Di Qingho, please wait. Qin Qingshui's body suddenly turned stiff. With a leap, he leaped hundreds of feet up into the sky. His white robe was blown by the wind, bringing him back like a sail. A group of guards clad in sackcloth, their clothes full of patches, escorted a shabby coach. All the paint on the coach had peeled off, and there were a few large holes on the roof of the coach, through which the wind and rain poured into the coach. Among the 4 wheels of the coach, 3 of them had their spokes peeled off. Every time the coach moved, the wheels would produce a creaking noise, as if they were going to fall apart at any time. As for the animal that pulled the coach, Wuxia had no idea whether he should call it a horse or something else. In short, the animal was so skinny that he could see 2 rows of ribs, and was foaming at the mouth. It staggered a few steps towards Wuxia, but because of its lack of strength, its legs gave way, and it nearly knelt down on the ground. Naturally, the man who came here with such a splendid coach was none other than the current Duke of Yanxing, the Grand Master of Great Yin Dynasty's imperial family court, Duke Yuxian. Gasping for breath, Yuxian came out from the coach, waved his hand and said, "Who is Lu Chengfeng? Come here." Wu Qi pointed his finger at Lu Chengfeng, whose shoulders were being grabbed by two beast warriors, smiled and said, "Your Excellency, this is my young master." Yuxian gave them a glance, snorted coldly and said, "Qin Qingshui, let him go, and stop talking nonsense." Qin Qingshui's expression changed. He bowed respectfully at Yuxian and slightly shook his head. Both beast warriors quickly let go of Lu Chengfeng's hand. Smilingly, Wu Qi dispersed the jade-breaking palm energy that he had gathered in his palm, then accompanied Lu Chengfeng and came next to Yuxian's coach. Through the broken window of the coach, Wu Qi could see Tai Yuewu sitting in the coach with a gloomy face, staring blankly at the rainwater that was pouring down from the hole of the coach roof. The rainwater was dripping, drenching Tai Yuewu's expensive and luxurious palace dress. The complicated hair bun that she had tied up with great effort was now messed up by the wind and rain. Lu Chengfeng looked at Tai Yuewu in shock, asked with a low voice, "Mother, this is..." With a feeble voice, Tai Yuewu introduced Yuxian's identity. Lu Chengfeng quickly bowed and greeted Yuxian. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and gave Yuxian an appraising glance. Before coming here, he had learned from Lu Qiulua, the chief supervisor of Lu clan of Liang in Ji City, that Yuxian was greedy and lustful. His greed and hypocrisy were well known in Ji City. He threw a glance at Yuxian's ragged and coarse cloth, then quickly glanced at the corner of his underwear made from the silk of 1,000-years-old ice silkworm that was accidentally revealed. Without saying anything, Wu Qi pulled Lu Chengfeng and took a few steps aside, whispering something to him. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Lu Chengfeng was startled, then he nodded his head heavily. When Yuxian saw Wu Qi retreating with Lu Chengfeng, he put on a straight face and knitted his brows unhappily. But soon, Wu Qi came up to Yuxian again, lowered his voice and said, "Duke Yuxian, can you let my young master take over everything left behind by Duke Yanlu as soon as possible and smoothly as I can by offering a province of Great Yin Dynasty to you?" Yuxian was taken aback. It was as if he suddenly saw countless golden gleams blinking and blinking in front of him. It was the golden gleam emitted by the convergence of numerous golden mountains. He cried out in shock, "The land of a county? Give it to me? I'm an honest man, and I've never been greedy for any ill-gotten gains." Yuxian swallowed a mouthful of saliva, lowered his voice again and said, "But the land of a county? Your young master has it? Is your young master willing to give it to you?" You should have told me earlier. If you had told me there was a land of a county, I would have done everything beautifully when you came to the city. As long as I can confirm that your young master is the son of Duke Yanlu, everything left behind by Duke Yanlu will naturally be inherited by him. With a deep voice, Wu Qi said, "Of course, the land of a county. I suppose Duke Yuxian should know that Chief General once offered a reward for a land of a county." Whispering to Yuxian, he explained how he and Lu Chengfeng assisted Yan Bugui in accomplishing the mission. Then Wu Qi told Yuxian everything that happened. Once again, he promised Yuxian that as long as Lu Chengfeng inherited everything that belonged to Yan Buji, he would give the land of a county that was offered by Chief General Jing Ke to Yuxian. Of course, Yuxian had to make sure that the reward for a land of a county would be given to Lu Chengfeng. Yuxian licked his lips with great difficulty, then said with a dry voice, "I'm an honest man. But it would be disrespectful to refuse a land of a county, and I have no choice but to accept it." Taking a deep breath, Yuxian pointed his finger at Qin Qingshui and suddenly broke out into curses. "Qin Qingshui, have you gone mad or what? Do you think you can offend the young master of Duke Yanlu? How many bribes have you accepted from others that made you have the audacity to make things difficult for Chengfeng? Don't you know that once his identity is confirmed, he will be a core member of Imperial Clan of Great Yin Dynasty? You have taken bribes and bent the law. I can't tolerate any sand in my eyes, and I will definitely report you to the Chief General." Slapping hard on Lu Chengfeng's shoulder, Yuxian cried out sternly, "Let's go! Summon all the Imperial elders of Imperial Family Court, and confirmed Qingfeng's identity with a drop of blood. The strong wind blew and the heavy rain fell. Everyone on the scene was struck dumb. Summoning all the imperial elders of imperial family court in the middle of the night. What was wrong with Yu Xian? Chapter 70. Thunder rumbled, lightning bolts danced wildly, and heavy rain poured down. The drainage system of Ji City was excellent. Despite the heavy rain, there was not a single puddle on the street. A large group of people was marching on the street, consisting of soldiers from City Defense Army, Scouting Office, and the men from Imperial Family Court brought here by Yu Xian. Walking along the main road in the center of Ji City, the group quickly came to the entrance of Great Yin Dynasty's Imperial Palace. With Yu Xian calling for the entrance, the heavy palace gate of Great Yin Dynasty, standing 120 feet tall and 6 feet thick, slowly opened up, revealing a pitch-black tunnel behind it. The walls on both sides of the tunnel were 220 feet tall, and the width of the tunnel was only 24 feet. Walking in the tunnel and looking at the dark sky filled with flashing lightning and rumbling thunder, it gave one an extremely oppressive and uneasy feeling of killing and heaviness. Every 300 feet, there was a bridge built on both sides of the tunnel. Not only was it convenient for the soldiers on both sides of the wall, it was also a very powerful defensive measure. As long as a team of archers was deployed on the bridge, and together with the soldiers on both sides of the wall, they would be able to attack the enemies in the tunnel from all angles without any blind spots. The clattering of hooves could be heard, and the oppressive atmosphere was getting stronger and stronger. After walking along the tunnel for 7 miles and passing through a thick and heavy alloy door, the tunnel suddenly opened up, revealing a group of magnificent palaces. On top of the thick and heavy pyramid-shaped stone platform, layers upon layers of palaces, mainly dark green in color, were stacked on top of each other. From the bottom to the top, the palaces had a total of 9 floors. The tallest palace was over 1,000 feet above the ground. The dark clouds were almost sticking to the roofs of the few palaces, and the lightning bolts were shooting down through the dark glazed tiles on the palaces. It was as if the few palaces were built in the sky, looming amidst the dark clouds and lightning bolts, giving them a very mysterious appearance. From what Wuxia could see, the width of this group of palaces was about 5 miles from east to west. 9 floors of palaces, over 1,000 feet tall from the bottom to the top, and there were at least 20 to 30,000 pavilions and pavilions. Although the style of the palaces was a little monotonous, as they were basically printed from the same mold, with 3, 6, and 9 rooms and tall eaves, the atmosphere was still indescribable with words. After entering the Xiantian realm, a martial artist's spiritual sense would be 100 times sharper than an ordinary martial artist's. Moreover, Wuxia had fused with a lot of soul particles, which had strengthened his soul by several times. His soul sense could basically be compared to a real Taoist master of embryonic breath tier. Countless sharp murderous auras were faintly discernible in the layers of palaces ahead. Wuxia could clearly sense that there were at least tens of thousands of elite experts hiding in this vast expanse of palaces. More than 1,000 of them were at the peak of the Hotian realm, and more than 100 of them were at the Xiantian realm. There were also some subtle and unfathomable auras hidden among them. Wuxia didn't dare to guess what realm they were at. A water-dipper-thick bolt of lightning struck down from the dark clouds, and struck on a golden statue standing on the square in front of the palace. In front of the main hall of Great Yin Dynasty's Imperial Palace, there was a huge square, measuring about 5 miles in both width and length. On this square, there were 8 rows and 8 rows of 64 metal statues, each more than 100 feet tall. All the statues looked exactly the same. They were all mighty warriors, clad in heavy armor, and holding long swords in their hands. The bolt of lightning struck on one of the golden statues. The violent electric current surged through the statue, and immediately, a blinding blue light burst out from the statue. A tremendous electric current was surging and rocking within the statue, stimulating it and causing thousands of palm-sized runes and runes to emerge on its surface. The translucent blue runes were wheeling and wheeling on the surface of the statue, while a powerful aura that could make one feel suffocated was vaguely spreading out in all directions. What a powerful defensive formation. Wuqi gasped and gave these metal statues a cautious look. Led by Yu Xian, the company took a detour around the palaces in front of them and went straight to the back garden of Great Yin Dynasty's imperial palace through a main road at the side. Here Wuqi saw the true core of Great Yin Dynasty. It was a small grassland with a circumference of a few acres, and a few old pine trees were growing in a disorderly manner. Right in the middle of the grassland was a thatched cottage, which was built using wood and covered with straw. It measured over 100 feet in both width and length. With this thatched cottage as the center, there were 8 smaller cottages arranged in the shape of 9 palaces. The cottage in the middle was as simple as it could be, but the 8 smaller cottages on the outside were much better. Although they were built in the same simple style, at least they were made of bricks, earth, and wood, and the roof was covered with glazed tiles. At least, they didn't have to worry about being blown away by a strong wind. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. With the bright light, Wuqi saw a plaque hanging on top of the cottage in the middle, with 3 characters written on it. Yan Fei Tian. Wuqi had no idea who wrote these 3 characters, but the strokes were swift and fierce, as if there was a real rare bird rubbing its fists and palms on the ground, getting ready to soar into the sky with the help of the wind. Bolts of lightning flashed across the sky, and the pale green characters of Yan Feitian kept flashing before everyone's eyes. Wuqi and those who had a strong cultivation base could still stand straight, but for those who had a weaker cultivation base, when they stared at the 3 characters for a long time, their bodies began to tremble, and they couldn't even stand straight. Some of them even fell to the ground in a sorry state. Yu Xian was holding a shabby umbrella that was full of holes, standing in front of the cottage and staring blankly at the 3 characters on the plaque. Over 2,000 years ago, the founding ancestor of Great Yin Dynasty, together with many of his disciples and people, built this meeting hall using only a piece of wood and a handful of grass. 2,000 years later, Great Yin Dynasty has a population of hundreds of millions of people, countless cities, and a boundless territory. But this place is still the true heart of Great Yin Dynasty. Yu Xian used a slightly fanatical and worshipful tone to slowly tell the story to Wu Qi, to Lu Qingfeng, and even to Tai Yuewu. Not only him, even Yan Jiuhui, Yan Bugui, and a few other men, when they saw this crude cottage, had their bodies straightened up, and their faces were filled with an indescribable holiness and solemnity. Over 2,000 years ago, the emperor of Yan, Yan Dan, brought together several dozens of hanger-ons and several tens of thousands of people, and built the first crude cottage in this place. Using this place as the starting point, they worked hard to build the current Great Yin Dynasty, using only a piece of wood and a handful of grass. As one of his people, as his direct descendant, Yu Xian had temporarily forgotten about all the gold, silver, and jewelry in this place, which was like a sacred place of religion. This was the meeting hall where Yan Dan and his men used to sit 2,000 years ago, and it was also the location of the imperial family court, which was used by Great Yin Dynasty to handle all the affairs related to the imperial clan and vassal kingdoms. Suddenly, Qin Qingshui broke the atmosphere that was like a religious ceremony. Duke Yu Xian, please continue with your work. Qingshui will escort you to this place, and I won't be involved in anything else. The hostage of Xian Kingdom, Tabaqingya, has been killed. I hope Duke Yu Xian can give Qingshui an explanation later. Yu Xian snorted coldly, gave Qin Qingshui a glance, and waved his hand noncommittally. Qin Qingshui gave Lu Qingfeng and Wu Qi a deep look, snorted coldly as well, and left with a large group of subordinates behind him. Tonight's incident wasn't completely solved yet. At least, he still needed to personally handle the scene of the assassination. On the other side, Yan Jiuhui let out a loud laugh and said, IG City is not under the jurisdiction of West Wind Guard. TSK, this has nothing to do with us. We're just here to watch the fun. Hee Lu Qingfeng, before your identity is confirmed, I'll let Lao Tzu call you a little brat a few more times. Ha 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 ha. Yan Jiuhui was laughing complacently, but Yan Bugui had a strange expression on his face. He kept giving Lu Qingfeng a glance from top to bottom, then suddenly breathed out a sigh. Wu Qi nodded his head and smiled at Yan Bugui. On the other hand, Yan Bugue returned a smile back to Wuqi listlessly. Once again he used that strange gaze to look at Lu Chengfeng. Led by Yu Xian, the men changed into the clean and soft straw sandals prepared by Wuqi, walked into the thatched cottage, and sat down on the mats that were also woven with fine grass according to their status. Not long after that, a series of footsteps was heard coming from outside the thatched cottage. One after another, old men who had the same age and appearance as Yu Xian arrived. Silently, they changed into the straw sandals, walked into the cottage, and sat down on the mats on both sides of Yu Xian. In the imperial family court of Great Yan Dynasty, there was only one imperial patriarch, and he was Duke Yanxing Yu Xian. Apart from them, there were also 48 imperial elders, all of whom were members of imperial clan of Great Yan Dynasty, who had the same status as Yu Xian. There were also a few of them who came from wealthy clans such as Jing clan, Gao clan, Tian clan, Lu clan, and Qin clan. They formed the imperial family court, and basically, they had the final say in all the affairs related to imperial clan of Great Yan Dynasty and all vassal kingdoms. After briefly introducing Lu Qingfeng's identity, Yu Xian immediately urged the men to follow the law of Yan Dynasty and go through the procedure of blood inheritance. The Duke of Yan Lu Yan Buji had left behind a rich inheritance, a fortune that could make anyone jealous. As for these things left behind by Yan Buji, if the imperial family court didn't handle it properly, it might bring them a great trouble. Therefore, the imperial family court simply came up with a rule that stated, as long as it was a son of Yan Buji, regardless of his background, the first one who arrived at Ji City would be his successor. All the imperial elders present on the scene were the people who had passed this rule. Therefore, although they were puzzled as to why Yu Xian would summon them to the imperial family court in the middle of the night, since it was the son of Yan Buji who came to them, it was inevitable for them to work overtime. If they didn't carry out the blood inheritance on Lu Qingfeng now, what if another illegitimate son of Yan Buji came to them? Wouldn't that bring them another great trouble? No one raised any objection. According to the previously agreed procedure, under the supervision of all the imperial elders, Yu Xian and his men opened up a secret door under the imperial family court. From a secret chamber that was filled with countless restrictive spells, they took out a test tube made of transparent white crystal. Inside the test tube, there was half a tube of medicine concocted using the blood and flesh essence of Yan Buji. Under the strict supervision of 48 imperial elders, Yu Xian, the Grand Master of Imperial Clan, and Yan Jiuhui, Yan Bugue, and a few other scouting officers, Lu Chengfeng took out his arm, carefully made a cut on his wrist with a knife, and dripped 3 drops of his blood essence into the test tube. In an instant, the pale red liquid in the test tube turned into a dark green color, and then emitted a blinding golden glow. Yu Xian sprung up from his seat abruptly, clapped his hands and said, "It's done. This province, the title of Duke Yanlu and the position of Zhuguozheng have been taken by someone." A few other experienced imperial elders also clapped their hands and laughed. "He is the son of Lady Ruyang. It won't be a problem for him to be taught since he was young. He is also the son of an aristocratic family, and he can inherit the title of Duke Yanlu." These imperial elders had made it very clear that Lu Chengfeng was the son of an aristocratic family. Therefore, they had no objection to him inheriting everything from Yan Buji. If the first illegitimate son of Yan Buji, who came to Ji City, was born in a commoner family, there might be some unforeseen events. But then again, how could the illegitimate son of Yan Buji and an ordinary girl know the news of Yan Buji's death? The blood had a pale green color, and was emitting a strong golden glow. It proved that Lu Chengfeng was indeed the son of Yan Buji. Yan Jiuhui's face fell instantly. He hesitated for a while, then finally came up and bowed at Lu Chengfeng, whose face was filled with wild joy. "I, Yan Jiuhui, the 12th generation of Imperial Clan of Great Yan Dynasty, offer greetings to the Master of Imperial Clan, Duke Yanlu." Yan Jiuhui raised his head up and gave Wuqi a strange smile. His lips moved, and he said a word without making a sound. "The 18th generation ancestor." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.